we have quorum. I'm going to call us to order and ask first if there's items of interest from commissioners. I guess I have one item that congratulations to Akasha, who is now a state rep and therefore gets to take a little hiatus from our commission because we can't have elected members on our commission. May this be a problem we have again, perhaps. Any other comments? Then let's go to the director's report. Joey Sippingen.
Thank you, Eli. So just following up on the Akasha news, the plan to fill that seat is to leave it open until later in the year, where I think we're going to do a full recruitment for a number of positions that could be terming out, and we'll build our panel of potential future commissioners at that time. Second thing I wanted to mention tonight is that the commissioners are all invited to a walking tour on the Willamette River South Reach. And you're going to get, if you haven't already, you'll get an email about that with all the logistics. It's to be Friday afternoon, March 6th. Commissioner Houck and the river team are going to lead a walking tour along the Willamette to see firsthand the key topics that are related to the South Reach Plan. And it's going to meet in South Waterfront at 1 p.m. by the Merriweather condos and then proceed from there. It should end around 3:30, so you'll be getting notice about that. Update on residential infill project. We have a city council work session tomorrow where we're discussing the first round of potential proposed amendments. We have been in consultation with the city council offices, and so there's another round of potential amendments that I believe that we'll be discussing later in February, and ideally heading to an amendment, a hearing on all these amendments in the end of March, or actually mid-March, early March. There's not a whole lot of amendments, which is the good news because it's settled down after all the work you did and after the deliberations with the public. There's some substantial ones about affordability and about infrastructure and some technical ones so far, but it seems to be a very manageable package that City Council can work through. Okay. We have, and the last thing is, you have received an email from us about the Expanding Affordable Housing Opportunities Project, that draft. And we're encouraging commissioners, and you were briefed on it, I think, at your last meeting. Any questions or comments on that, please draft those and email them to Eric Engstrom or Nan Stark by Tuesday, February 4th. Oh, the last thing is, I think you probably also have received an email on this too, but Donnie Oliveira has been appointed the Deputy Director for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. In that role, Donnie's ahead of our budget development and external sort of political contacts and oversees our financial group.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to consider adoption of the minutes from the 7th and 14th Psc meetings?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Steph. All in favor? Do we do a vote on this or we just do consent? I need a reminder.
Yes. Voice vote's fine.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Thank you. And now let's bring up staff, please, for the DOZA large table. Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for being here again for the 5th work session on the Design Overlay Zone Amendments work session. My name is Sandra Wood. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. With me today is Phil Namany with the BPS project team and Stacy Monroe with Bureau of Development Services that implements the Design Overlay Zone. And missing today is Laura Lillard, our colleague who couldn't be here today. But that's okay. We're still very well taken care of, I hope. We're switching gears a little bit. I know that you have all been working on the design standards. As we've been working on the design standards with you, we've been working on the design guidelines with the Design Commission. We've been moving in tandem, and pretty soon both of those efforts will be coming together. But we're switching gears today off of the design standards and going back to other proposals that are in the DOZA package. And we'll get back to design standards at our next meeting when we get back to the tenant for context. So today, as you remember, there's 5 buckets or groups of proposals for the DOZA proposals. The purpose, the map, thresholds, and process are number 3 and 4. That's really what we're focusing on today, and we sent you a spreadsheet on those. And then the tools, of course, is what we've been working heavily on. So I want to make sure that we all have the documents that we need for today's work session. You have a spreadsheet that looks like this, and hopefully yours has a bunch of sticky notes and notes on it also, called DOZA Thresholds and Process. Does everybody have that? We have extra copies. Any extra copies? So no stickies and notes.
So this would be,
What was emailed to you? Well, we'll get them around. We'll work. Okay.
I gave mine away already. Thank you.
So we are largely working off of that spreadsheet. We're using the PowerPoint just as a prompt to keep us moving along, especially when several of the amendments have to do with the same concept. So we're just using the PowerPoint to help us with that. Another document that would be very helpful if you have is Volume 2, which are the code and map amendments. So if you have that one, we'll be referring to that if you want to see what the original language is. And then the spreadsheet, of course, says what the amendment proposal is from various commissioners. We wanted to focus on thresholds and process today, even though we've talked mainly about all of these things, but there were a few other amendments that came through that didn't fall neatly into these buckets that are the beginning of the spreadsheet. So if we can just go ahead and get started with that, we will work through that. Another thing I wanted to mention is that since the last 2 work sessions have been work that the commission has done after the standards working group worked on things, the last 2 full commission meetings the spreadsheet has been a little more vetted because we had that standards working group. In this case, we haven't had any working group working on this, so nobody has discussed these amendments. They are just ideas from various commissioners, and so they're a little more raw, if you will. So just keep that in mind.
like, one clarification I think is correct is that we're not actually voting on these right now. These are straw polls because this will feed into the 3x3 and it'll come back and some of them need some fleshing out too. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we don't have to make motions today. We just want to see what the temperature of the room is and if we're moving forward on something. And then the people going into the 3x3 with the design commission will have a vetted list of the position of the commission. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go ahead and start with the other amendment requests that don't tie neatly into the thresholds and process standards. We estimate that this conversation might take 15 minutes. Eli, you were asking for just a general number, so we thought we would just put on the slide for all of us to work on. So the first item on the list, and if you look on the far left, there's a line item number, so we'll go by those, is a request from Commissioner Schultz that perhaps since the new design guidelines, the citywide design guidelines that the Design Commission is developing, since those are so great, that maybe those should replace the Central City Fundamental Design Guidelines.
You want me
Would you
to,
like to make the pitch?
you want me to talk about that?
And I also have Troy Doss here, and actually, why don't I go ahead and just have Troy come up? So he's in our Central City team from Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. He's been following the DOZA project, but he's our lead on the Central City Fundamentals design guidelines too.
Well, I mean, I'll start out with, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I realize that replacing the Central City Fundamental Guidelines hasn't been part of the public discussion, and therefore it's not probably appropriate at this point in time to be suggesting this kind of change. So this is more me, I think, prodding, maybe others in the public to really think through and embrace all the great work that's been done here and recognize that it's time to replace the fundamental design guidelines for Central City. They're out of date. And so appreciate Troy give us an update where he's at with that project, and we can probably leave it at that.
Okay.
At least from my point of view.
Okay, happy to do that. Troy Doss, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Central City team. So I have been tracking the DOZA process and kind of been advising a little bit in terms of how it affects the Central City, but we will be updating as soon as we can move DOZA on to City Council, because we're a little concerned about, one, not getting too far ahead of the process with updating the fundamentals. And we didn't want to create too much fatigue among all the stakeholders and staff who are currently working on DOZA to also work on the updated fundamentals. We've been tracking this a little bit, anticipate trying to get that moving more forward in a public way later this year. That said, we are planning on using what comes out of DOZA as the framework for how we would build the new fundamentals. So I would think that a number of these guidelines that are in the current proposal will be before you as part of what would be in the Central City Plan, as well as some additional guidance that's really dealing with the magnitude of development that happens in the Central City, because we don't feel that the current guidelines really hit the full breadth of the scale and some of the issues that are more applicable to the Central City. So we'll be adding some additional guidelines for review later this year.
Thank you. Any other additional ideas on this topic? So I guess I'm hearing general support for suggesting this is a place to spring from as you go to the fundamental design guidelines. Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I might add, and Troy, I'm sure you're already there, but is it's, kind of the context guidelines that I think we've all recognized are the place to be adding the unique spots for whatever's precious around kind of the unique areas within our city. And I would hope that we're not straying too far from what you've already outlined, and that it's within perhaps the context of the Central City is where we're tweaking design guidelines. I'm sure you're going to have great reasons for having tweaks in other parts of what we're doing here to address the Central City. But I guess in my mind, it just seems logical that whether it's Central City or as we move on to updating other areas, neighborhoods throughout the city, and perhaps replacing their design guidelines with the work that we're doing here, that's kind of the area that gets
And that's what our
adjusted
intention
more,
is. So,
more than not.
For instance, those of you who mess around with the Central City Fundamental Design Guidelines, you may be aware that there are also district-level design guidelines that have been adopted over the last 30 years. So we are trying to update those and to be more reflective of kind of like what you've been doing, how you've combined Design Guideline 1 and 2 into more of a district, kind of a higher level approach. We're looking at doing the same thing for each of the 10 sub-districts in the Central City. So that context on a district-specific level would be addressed in here as well, and maybe an urban design framework plan that came out of the concept plan or the Central City 2035 plan adopted a couple of years ago. That would be reflected in the guidelines as well. So we're just carrying that guidance over to the review level.
I guess I'll comment that in my review of these, I don't know the Central City guidelines very well, but as I've looked through these guidelines, it seemed like they would work downtown quite well. So if, and I've sort of thinking them through the downtown lens, because Central City is pretty large. Mm-hmm. If there were some efficiency of just saying that these are the design guidelines for downtown and there'd be additional sub-district, more detail, if the same document could work in both places, that would be very simple for the development community.
We'll try. We're going to see the degree to which we can do that. I mean, the examples we have in the guidelines in terms of giving you ideas of how that might be achieved, we want to update those to be a little more specific to the scale of development in the central city. But I think you're right. That's the basic premise is to build off of what we already have.
Okay, thank you. So we go to number 2 on this list.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
So the number 2 on the list is the suggestion is to eliminate chapter 33-218. And for those of you who aren't entrenched in the zoning code, those are the existing community design standards altogether, and place those design standards into the historic chapter. And I think the idea here is that the only properties that would be using the old community design standards that are on the books today are the conservation districts. So those reside within the historic chapter, and to move them there. So Commissioner Bortolaso, I think you had that suggestion from BDS, and we are planning on doing that, but we just aren't planning on doing it with DOZA. We're planning on doing it with the Historic Resource Code Amendment Project.
Does that work for you?
No problem with that.
Okay.
What's the logic of that? Why not just take care of it part of DOZA? I mean, I
Yeah.
get the logic of combining it with historic, but
Partially, they need to be renamed, rebranded, called out. Some of the standards don't apply. I mean, they do apply, but then when you carry them forward, they don't make sense in conservation districts. So with the Historic Resources Code projects, they're going to need to be moved and cleaned up at that
so
time
it's the
anyway.
cleanup piece
And the
that's happening.
stakeholders, we haven't been engaging with stakeholders in conservation districts for DOZA at all. since
Yeah, I
this
guess
doesn't
if all
apply.
you're doing though is just where they already apply there, and you're just cleaning up the code. I guess to me, I don't know if
I don't
how
know
much.
if there is such a thing anymore as just moving things in the code without opening things up for discussion.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, the fact that you're actually doing work to clean up and make them more applicable to historic makes
Yeah.
sense to me that you would wait.
Yeah.
If that's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And just to keep in mind, the historic code project, there may be 2 phases to it. And so this may be part of a second phase, because I think the first phase is really focused on the new kind of sets of designations and other things. And then they're going to come back with improving the tools. So, but the thought was we didn't want to start moving the tools around until we actually went through and improved them.
And the first phase is under development right now, right? That's coming to us pretty soon.
You'll be
It's on
seeing
the
that
heels of DOZA.
You'll be seeing that in a month or so.
So now you open a can of worms, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
What's the timeline approximately for that second phase?
You'll have to talk to Brandon when he's here, I think.
Well, I mean, to me, now it's like, are we talking 5 years out and you're not cleaning up till then? And we've got this weird, I mean, now I'm kind of like, okay, I thought if it was following right on the heels with phase 1 of the historic work, sure, why not?
So I just met with Brandon today, and with the historic chapter, he's completely reorganizing the historic chapter. So I don't even know how this would fit in.
Perfect time to
But-
figure out as he's redoing all that, right?
Yes, in his project, not in DOZA, again, because of the stakeholders. I think for me, it's like.
But I mean, at
mainly
least
the
in phase
stakeholders.
1.
Yes.
I guess we will bug Brandon
Yes.
to include it in phase 1, not phase 2.
We can talk to Brandon about that for sure.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great. Thank
Moving
you.
on.
Number 3, expand the purpose statement to include in harmony with nature.
I was
Make your pitch.
surprised to see this on here. I thought you already voted me down on that one, but I'm pleased to see it's here.
I don't think we had a vote on this, unless I
Yeah,
forgot it.
really? Okay.
Well, if you recall, I think it was probably back in November when we probably had discussions on the purpose statement.
Yeah.
I don't believe this was discussed at that point in time, but it was a piece of testimony that Mike provided, both related to the purpose statement and also to within volume 3, there's a summarizing of what design overlay is about that kind of summarizes the same words with the purpose statement. So I think your suggestion was both in volume 3 to have
Right.
something,
Yeah.
which the design commission I think is still needs to have a conversation with those intro pages. And then there was a suggestion to change it for the purpose statement. This would probably be a great suggestion to have Laura here to kind of go over, since she was really heavily involved in creating the purpose statement. But it may be something that might be worth, since it affects both the guidelines and possibly the code, to see whether the 3x3 has an interest in making the final determination on that.
Yeah, I think particularly given the context and design guideline 10, there's a lot of verbiage regarding green infrastructure, nature, that sort of thing. It just seemed to me the way it was stated just seemed kind of abrupt and could use something that responded to the concept that we want to design with nature.
Any comments? Yes, Chris?
Well, I'd like to add on to what Mike is saying. I agree with the argument he's outlined. I'd additionally say that to me this is important to add with respect to climate change, because climate change is a problem relating to our disharmony with the natural ecosystems of the planet. As we try and solve that problem, bring it back together, this seems like good reinforcement.
Additional thoughts?
I don't know how I feel about it, because I feel like it's a little out of, like, we spent a lot of time working on the purpose statement. I don't have the whole purpose statement sitting in front of me, so I kind of feel like I need to see it all together. I think it'd be personally a fabulous discussion at 3x3, and I think Mike, you're a part of that, right?
Yep.
And like I said, it may make a ton of sense. I think we should talk with Design Commission about it as well, and come back to it. So I guess I would say I would leave it on as a discussion item, and let's continue on. But I just personally, I don't remember exactly. Granted, I could look.
I will mention on page
the purpose
13,
statement and
it's
all that
actually
kind of stuff.
the purpose statement is much shorter than it used to be. So it's
Yeah, and it may be completely appropriate and great. I'm not arguing one or the other as much as just the moment. I don't feel like I have enough information to weigh it. That's all.
I had my original thought was much longer, long paragraph, and I pared it down to these few words that I thought conveyed that sentiment.
And just to let you know, I mean, this is actually, Mike's amendment is to the first sentence of the purpose statement, just to kind of provide some context. So the first sentence of the purpose statement is, the design overlay zone ensures that Portland is a city designed for people in harmony with nature, is what the amendment would be. And then it goes on to say, design overlay zone supports the city's evolution within current emerging centers of civic life. The overlay promotes design excellence in the built environment through the application of additional design guidelines and standards that, and then it does the 3 tenets.
I like Commissioner Schultz's idea of taking it back to the 3x3, because what we don't want to do is have a purpose statement that's setting us expectations here when the guidelines and the standards aren't delivering on that. So it seems like the 3x3 is a good place to wrap around in the purpose statement to make sure that they're still aligned.
And that was part of my intent as well, hoping that it would align.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is our chance to pitch what we want to come out of the 3x3. So it does seem like we should decide whether we want to recommend this as part of the language, which the other stuff would sync up with, or not. And I guess unless I'm hearing from Kath, maybe you're not comfortable making a recommendation on that, I'll speak for myself. I think that I would support this language with the clarification that it extends to more broad climate benefits as part of nature.
Yeah. I'm not here to overrule all my fellow commissioners, so just to your comment about, except for what I was going to say, the only thing I would just add is I personally feel like we spent a lot of time working with Design Commission in crafting the purpose statement and went back and forth between the two commissions. So it's just, if nothing else, out of respect for that process. It doesn't mean that this group couldn't tonight say there's a majority of us who support adding this. So to me, it's more a matter of recognition of that's the two commissions working together.
I tend to agree with that line of thought. I think I'm not necessarily, opposed to including in the language, but I would see the purpose of the 3x3 to do a final consistency check that kind of really looks at the package as a whole and makes sure we deliver on all the promises and that the language is all consistent throughout. So I would be totally open to, have that conversation then and consider it for inclusion then.
Okay, I guess I'm going to propose that we suggest for include. Oh, sorry, Kate.
Oh, I just was thinking that since it has been brought up, if people have strong feelings about it one way or another, now would be a time for the 3x3 or whatever it's called to know that the rest of the commissioners' feelings at this point. I kind of like the idea myself.
So to
I
give
like
three-
the change. I would
Okay.
like the change.
Okay. Yeah, I think as we go through this list, there'll be quite a number of items where we can either be passive going to 3x3 or suggest something for the 3x3. And I guess I'm going to support on this. I guess we can ask if people want to suggest to the 3x3 that we include some language about harmony with nature. Say aye. I guess I'm going to do a straw poll here. I'm practicing here, guys. So this is do we want to suggest this should be something that should be included in the 3x3 discussion as our recommendation, recognizing that they have to align things? So I'm seeing 2, 4,
Well, I guess I'm not.
5, 6.
So again, I'm okay. I'm a proponent of bringing it up for a topic. I'm not necessarily ready to say I'm ready to go. Hey, design commissioners, I think this need to be added. So there's a little nuance there that's important to me.
Okay.
Is that 6-3 or?
So I have a process question. So the 3x3 gets together, and then do the recommendations out of the 3x3 presumably come back to us for final?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why we're taking the straw polls is so that we can develop a list of amendment concepts.
Right.
Go to the 3x3 and see what the design commission is doing, and we'll identify the ones where they're doing this and you're doing that, and we need to come back together. Or maybe you're doing this and they're like, we never thought about that. That's a good idea. How do we move in that direction too? So the list that we're creating is a concept list to be worked on, and they're doing the same. They're not doing changes yet.
Right. And the desire, if at all possible, is to have them converge, but there could be a difference of opinion.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Jeff?
I was just going to quickly comment. I share Kat's concern. And as much as I hate to not be aligned with Mike on anything to do with the environment, I'm nervous about us sort of piecemeal suggesting changes to the purpose statement. I think the purpose statement should be tight and succinct. And if everybody says, yes, but here's some words I think are important. Oh, I think, I want to add some affordable housing. I think at some point it's hard to vote sentence by sentence on proposed changes. So I would share with Kat, I think it's fine if a smaller group wrestles with what's the right language for the purpose statement. So I'm not going to support any recommendations to change it because I'm operating in a vacuum. I don't know if this is the only one or if there are going to be 3 or 4 or 5 more proposed changes. So I'll just say I think it's great if 3x3 takes a final look at the purpose statement, considers some ideas that have been out there, but doesn't consider knowing that there's a recommendation to do it. So I agree with Kat's nuance. So
Okay, so I'm going to suggest 2 votes. One, straw poll. One is, should this be a topic for the 3x3 to discuss? Okay. Should the PSC recommend that they include language related to human nature as part of that discussion? So I'm getting 1, 2, 3,
halfway up.
4, 4. Okay, so I'm getting 4, and so
Okay, you can be a
I guess we're about 50-50 on that recommendation.
So, and for the record, this particular one, I don't think of as wordsmithing at all. I think it's a very fundamental philosophical position the city should be taking. So,
I feel the same way about adding an affordable housing language, and then perhaps there's other people who have, so it's
wait.
design review. It's not. Anyway.
Well, we haven't quite done 15 minutes, but let's go to the next one, if that's all right. Thanks.
Okay, so we're moving on to thresholds and process. Hopefully, this diagram looks familiar to you and gives kind of the outline of how the thresholds work. And this is the slide for outside Central City. On our spreadsheet, number 4 for map changes, you didn't have any, so we'll move on. Number 5 is just a small technical fix, and that was on the consent list, so we don't need to talk about it. So that moves us on to number 6. And the suggestion here is that we add, that we add bridges to the list of non-standard improvements. And why this matters is because standard improvement, so basically the zoning code doesn't apply in the public right-of-way, but the design overlay does in certain circumstances. Standard improvements in the right-of-way, think, traffic lights, handicap ramps, etc. Those are standard improvements. They never go through design review, but non-standard improvements do go through design review. So this suggestion from Commissioner Bortolaso is to add bridges to the list of non-standard improvements. Therefore, bridges would need to go through design review. Correct?
Correct.
Is that?
So, and I just want to provide an update on that. I did reach out to PBOT on this, and evidently there's been a lot of conversation between PBOT and BDS on this exact subject. About how much oversight the Design Commission should have with bridges. And what I gathered from the letter from PBOT was that bridges are still generally an engineering infrastructure piece that are subject to some basic rules and so on. And they tend to look at that as still being a standard improvement. What they suggested, which they currently do, is that they bring these kind of major capital infrastructure things like bridges to the Design Commission for a briefing to get essentially advice on, but that they're not necessarily subject to a design review process where there's actually a case file number and so on. So that is actually was a memo that came out last March. So it looked like there'd been a lot of conversation on this already. So I don't know that it's our call to then in a zoning code language dictate that a bridge is a non-standard improvement if other city codes do not say the same thing.
Well, I have to say this particular item, which was a BDS suggestion, particularly resonated with me. I mean, I get that bridges are, a piece of infrastructure. It has a very clear function, and there's structure dictates a lot of it. But they are also some pretty important pieces of the image of our city, and I would say even more so than I would say most buildings. Especially in a city like ours that has multiple bridges, and they're just the gateway to the city, to and from the city. So it resonated with me particularly because I think that's really perhaps a piece of engineering that really could benefit from additional discussions and conversations from a design standpoint, not just strictly technical. I get the technical PBOT explanation, but I think there is an aesthetics and a kind of a bigger picture that bridges play within the city.
Stacy, would you like to represent BDS on why this was suggested from their letter?
Sure. I think our main concern, and we've struggled with this over the past year with several new bridges that have come online, I think are just the contextual response. As Commissioner Bertolazzo mentioned, some of these are gateways into neighborhoods and into the city. In addition, the landings, some of these landings not only address where the bridge touches down, but also spread out into plazas and other areas that have placemaking opportunities. And it's those type of elements that we haven't been able to participate in, and the community hasn't able to benefit from that public process. So that was our push for that.
Can I ask a clarifying question? This is just bridges outside the central city, right? So most of the bridges I envision in my head are in central city. And am I correct that would not be covered by this part of the code?
This applies. This is specific to the design overlay zone in general. So it could be in the central city, outside central city. Some of the conversation that's been
Okay.
taking place was, I think, with the Flanders Bridge across 405, and then of course I think it's called the Blumenauer Bridge across I-84, which is linking sort of the central east side and the Lloyd district.
Okay. Any discussion?
I guess I have a general question for the two of you. Is it really within the call of the zoning code to determine what's a standard improvement and a non-standard improvement, or is that within the city engineer's purview?
That's within the city engineer's purview, and basically it reflects a standard. It's a standard detail that the engineer develops and approves, and then that standard detail is used throughout the city, and it's not modified. It's not tailored to a specific area or a certain response. It's just a standard improvement that's been approved by the city engineer, and then it's used citywide. So that's the definition of a standard improvement.
So if we added bridges and called them a non-standard improvement, I'm sorry I'm asking you this today.
That's fine.
If we added bridges and said they needed to go through design review, does the city engineer need to change anything in Title 17 or the rulemaking, or do they need to change course?
I think that's a discussion we need to have with them.
Okay.
I don't think that's something I can answer right now. It includes their voice.
Okay.
I think it brings up the question with some of these city improvements. It's kind of a similar thing can sometimes happen with parks, where the Parks Bureau may have their own planning process. They may involve the Design Commission in going through that, but there's currently actually an exemption that parks uses don't necessarily have to go through the design overlay and design review process. I think it's that same kind of idea about, I think the bureaus do work together and they provide briefing, but in this case, I think it ultimately comes down to the city engineer for PBOT about whether they can incorporate suggestions made by the design commission or not. And I guess the question would be whether we want to pursue having a greater role with the design commission on that, or some sort of a regulatory role.
Okay.
I'm a little bit of a what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and I agree that bridges or pedestrian overpasses and all this stuff has a big impact. And I was a part of when Selwood Bridge happened to come through Design Commission and saw how Design Commission was able to influence some really good changes. So I'm completely supportive of, again, making, I guess, public entities kind of go through the process that we're making private entities go through for their design work.
I guess the question I'd respond to that is, since I'm assuming the Selwood Bridge also was through a briefing process and not through a formally applied for design review.
Potentially,
Did it still work? I guess, does that briefing process, the other question is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If the current briefing process is actually working, do we need to create a more stringent regulatory process?
So Phil, I'm going to put it back on you. Should we just then have all private development be briefed by Design Commission, and perhaps that's the same way to encourage private development to work through a process? I'm being totally
We're all one-
sarcastic,
no,
and,
we're all
and
one
we
city.
should not have a back and
Second that
forth on
motion.
this. I'm just, my personal opinion is, I hear what you're saying. A briefing is something they end up getting choose to do, and I personally am a proponent of making a requirement for bridges.
Any other thoughts on this one? Yeah, Steph.
I'm just curious, because I was also involved in the Selwood as a stakeholder advisory committee member for a while, and I'm just curious, for a project like that, you have numerous other advisory committees and stakeholder tax and SACs. How would that be would a design review be in tandem with? Would it be after? What would that process potentially look like?
So I think the difference here is that advisory committees are giving advice. Design Commission is a regulatory body that's regulating and approving or not approving something. So presumably it would be after the advice had been gotten from community members or other advisory committees.
And it'd be appealable to City Council. Is that correct?
If we added it, then we would have to say what type of review it would be. So this gets into the thresholds. If it's a type 3, then the appeal would go to City Council.
Okay.
And even if we went forward with this, it sounds like we'd need to wrap around with the city engineer and have a conversation with them about, what implications it has in their codes, because we don't want two codes saying different things anyway.
Can we do a straw poll of folks now to see what we think we should nudge the city to work on this more? All in favor? Raise your hand. Looks like we'd like that to happen. Thank you. The last item in this batch is tree diameter.
Yeah, this is one of mine. Yeah, I think we're continuing to lose urban forest canopy at a pretty good clip, and I think 6 inches is quite large, and I think it's supportable to go to 3 inches. I haven't seen specific input from the Urban Forestry Commission or the Urban Forester on this. Have you guys had any interaction with them at all?
So keep in mind, this is specific. This change that we were proposing was specific to the South Auditorium Plan District, which currently, in the wording there, does not have any caliper inch.
Oh.
But then you go to the South Auditorium Plan District. And this was something I had to look at
Oh,
to follow up on this, which is a little more clear than what I answered here. But
yeah.
you go to the South Auditorium Plan District, it requires design review for removal of trees 6 inches or larger. So essentially what I was just trying to do is, it was more of a technical change, kind of take that 6 inch threshold from the plan district and put it in the design overlay zone, so somebody doesn't consider, oh, I have a 2 inch caliper tree, I better, it says I need to go, the design overlay applies, I need to go to the South Auditorium Plan District, and it turns out you can remove it without going through design review. So it was essentially just to kind of line up the stuff in 420 with the South Auditorium Plan District. We did not necessarily, it's not a policy difference or anything that we felt needed to have additional kind of consulting from, say, the urban forestry. So I think the question that would come up is if there was a desire to have smaller trees be under that design review purview, it would actually be going back and adjusting the South Auditorium Plan District.
Yeah, I thought it was much broader than that. So yeah, I'm not concerned particularly.
Biking over here, though, I got to look at a few of them. So if anyone wants to see what's in the district here, we have lots of trees 6 inches or more,
Yeah.
and a few that are 3 inches or more.
Yeah, and if you go down by the fountain area, those pine trees really are, for example, full of birds during migration, for example. So they do provide some habitat. But I was addressing something I thought was much broader than that. So withdrawn.
Okay, what's the next one for us?
The next one is line item 8, and this has to do with, are we talking about that? Yeah. If you look at the exemptions, starting on page 17 of volume 2, they go 1, 2, 3 pages, and it's A through S. So it's quite a unwieldy list, and this recommendation from Commissioner Bortolaso via BDS is that we reorganize the headings of the exemptions.
Yeah, I particularly liked how BGS going to give an example how it could be organized by under the headings of new development, additions, changes to existing development, rooftop elements, etc. I thought it was a much clearer way to scan through the long list.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't really have an issue with this idea. We would probably work with using the BDS example as a template and work on that. But since it is going to completely reorient the exemptions, we thought we'd open it up for discussion.
Any concerns with that idea? Sounds like we're going to agree with that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So moving along with exemptions, again, page 17, we have several of these items are about exemptions. Item 9 is about the first exemption A, which is about separating out the historic conservation districts from the exemption list and then list the rest. So
I think I can describe. I think when I read this long list, I got confused by it. And I think I've got some language that I could suggest that would just be clarifying. I think letter A, when I read it, it made me think you could either pick in a historic district, you could just build housing under a certain size, and you would use that exemption. You wouldn't have to deal with historic district things, which I know is not the intent here. And so one way to achieve it, I think, would be in letter A, just start off with historic or conservation landmarks or sites. Just that's the exempted item. And then have a little note that you can look in the historic resource overlay zone for more information about it. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think mostly I want to withdraw my suggestion just to pull it out entirely, and I might suggest a little clarifying language that might make it easier for me to read at least.
So the one question I had, because the one thing this exemption has, I think that other exemptions don't have, is it does say, if the site is historic or conservation landmark or in a historic or conservation district, it says it is instead subject to the regulations of this other chapter. And I read that to basically say, stop here, do not pass go, and instead go to 33.445 and not even look at these other exemptions.
And that's current code, right? Because it's not underlined.
Yeah, that's a current code. So I guess I'd be curious what would be a way to further clarify that.
I guess what you're saying is that this is current code and people understand it now. We're not confused by it.
Yeah. The thing that confused me is it says the following items are exempt from design review and design standards. And then if you just pick number C, let's say, it doesn't require a permit, then you could ignore, it makes me think you could ignore all the rest, even if you're in a historic area. That's obviously not the intent of this, right?
Correct.
So you could just pick anything off this list and ignore the rest.
You elevated A to be, say, part of the narrative.
That would be more clear for me, is to do that.
I don't know how that would work from a BDS implementation standpoint, but the idea, would be that the
but I think
following items are exempt from design review and then have within there say if a site is in a historic or conservation district or a landmark, then you should go to 33.445.
It would be clearer to me if they were separated from the list in that way you just described. Is anyone else tracking this, or just move on?
I'm tracking it. I'm not. It didn't. I understand why it's could be confusing. At the same time, I guess I didn't find it confusing. So I don't know to quite tell you there, Eli, except it couldn't hurt to see if there's any thoughts, or Eli, if you had some more time to spend some thoughts on what you'd propose and just see if there's a way to make it more clear.
I'm happy to work outside of
let's
meeting
do that.
just to
I
see
mean, the
if
good news is we're on the same page on the policy.
Yeah, I think it's not a policy question.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do
So
that.
let's move on then. Thank you.
Number 10 is a small typo, and it's on consent, so we can move on. Number 11 is about electrical vehicle charging stations, and this is the idea that they're not listed separately in the exemptions, and maybe they should. Right, Commissioner Bortolazzo?
Question?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not fully sure I understand the context of this. So this is charging stations installed as part of private development?
Correct. They would be something normally, installed in a parking lot.
Parking lot, as opposed to
on the street or on the sidewalk with a connection to the street.
So the distinction, the things that came to mind when I thought about this, I thought more of the street example. And I know we have had instances of individual residents who wanted to put a charging station in front of their property because they had no driveway. PBOT dropped a whole bunch of pay stations on neighborhood streets in my neighborhood. So the pay station in front of my neighboring apartment building. I don't think anybody did design review on that, or the bike share docking stations.
Standard improvement in the right of way.
That's probably a good example of our last conversation about if PBOT, if the city engineer comes up with a standard set of standards for a vehicle charging station placed in a sidewalk or in the right of way, then at that point it's exempt from design review. Just like if they come up with standards for benches or other things.
Okay. So that would not apply in this case because we're talking about things that are more than 20 feet from the street and therefore not within the realm of the city engineer. Is that the...
So this would be on, I think the idea was it's on private property. Think of Fred Meyer, where there's electric charging stations there. It's set back from the street, and there's a accessory, what we would consider a detached accessory structure. So one thought is that's already covered by letter K, detached accessory structures no more than 300 square feet in floor area when located at least 20 feet from the street lot lines or within the existing vehicle area. So I think that was your position, right, Phil, that it was already covered by K.
Okay, it wasn't clear to me that I was already covered. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it's something that's worth spelling out.
So to that, I would have no idea that an electrical charging station is an detached accessory structure. And maybe it's defined in detached accessory structures in the definitions. And if so, then it seems like you just go there. Okay, it's clear. I get it now. But if it's not defined somewhere, then perhaps adding some more clarity can't hurt.
And there's a lot of things that are detached accessory
I'm
structure.
sure.
Electrical vaults, bike parking sheds, trash enclosures. So we
Whatever
tried to
reason
just
I know bike
capture it
parking and
all.
trash are detached accessory. I had no idea.
We just tried it, so we're not listing out.
So if someone were
bunch of things.
proposing a detached charging station, and they didn't want to go through the design review, they would immediately try and find something that it would fit under.
Right.
Wouldn't they be pretty motivated to figure it out? Is my suspicion.
And the exemption says in an existing parking area. So the only limitation is really you have to have a parking area, and it can't be more than 300 square feet. So it's pretty
But
flexible.
more with- so
And
it
this
could
is
be-
kind of a catch-all. This is sort of a catch-all exemption. It's also supposed to maybe get at the smaller bike shed or the smaller trash enclosure that is being often placed in a parking lot or set back.
Kind of
And-
utilitarian.
And so, the definition of structure covers pretty much anything built on or above the ground or something along those lines. So it can cover a wide range of things.
Is that working for folks as currently written? Okay, thanks. Let's go to the next one. So this is number 12.
Number 12, yes, I'm trying to wrap my head
Well, we
around
recommended this
one.
as consent. This is
Oh, consent.
then should be integrated into the facade design using complementary color and materials.
Yeah, right now our proposal didn't have any thing about matching color or intrinsic, with the storefront, and we don't have an issue with putting that in.
All right, then unless there's any concern, let's go to the 13.
So 13 would be probably beneficial to take a look at page 19. And we're still in exemptions. And we're talking about letter N of those exemptions. And it's basically how much of the facade of a building can be changed or altered before it triggers design review. That's the question here. And there's letters 1 through 6. The intent of this list is that developers or property owners should be able to add awnings if they meet certain specifications, change the storefront glazing and mullion system, number 2. 3, add louvers and vents or mechanical equipment. 4, removal of fire escapes should not trigger design review. 5, voluntary or required seismic bracing on a building wouldn't require design review. And 6 is a blanket 200 square feet on a facade of a building outside of Central City. So I think the question here from Commissioner Bortolaso and I guess BDS2 was, is this cumulative? Can you do, for example, let's just use louvers as an example, and vents. Can you do, and those are limited to 1 square feet, can you do 200 little vents at 1 square feet and then do another 200 square feet of facade alterations by using number 6? So you're using 3 and 6. I think the intent here, just talking to Phil earlier this morning, was that yes, you can do an awning and remove a fire escape and do many vents that are 1 square feet, and you also get an extra 200 square feet of facade area that you can change. That's the intent. So we'd probably want to add after 5 a colon and to clarify that. if you agree with that policy intent.
Do people agree with that policy intent? Yes? Sounds like. No concerns? Let's do it. Does that work for you, Ben? You asked for it, yeah.
You know, after and that was the intent, and that was the reason why I exclude 1 to 5 above. But really looking at this, you know, after it's all settled, I'm not too sure that it's really something that requires that specific exclusion. So I'm totally willing to.
Well, staff added one word and it worked for me.
Sounds great.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Number 14 and 15 have to do with radon mitigation systems on non-street facing facades. So I'm going to have, what? Oh, they're on consent.
Oh, these are consent. Sorry, thank you. Let's go to number 18.
Just to clarify, what we'll probably do with the radon is, since that is also affecting item N of the exemptions, is we will potentially place and there might be another item, so there might be 1 through 7, and one of the items within the first 6 will be probably radon on a non-street facing facade.
Okay.
Okay. So 16 and 17 are also on consent, and I believe I'm supposed to know. We're still talking about exemptions here. So now number 18, we're on the roof of the building now. We're not on the front facade of the building. And page 21. So this is, do you want to describe
I can describe it. Yeah, there's some language in here saying that a solar panel on a roof must be set back at least 3 feet from the roof edges and ridge lines to get the exemption. Having put some solar panels on roofs, the fire department has quite a bit to say about where they go already. So I was suggesting that we don't need to mimic it with the zoning code. If someone can get permission to put a solar panel right up to the edge or a little closer than 3 feet, then I don't think that should be a reason to trigger design review.
But this
Staff
standard
concerns?
isn't just about solar panels, though. It's about other alterations and additions to roofs. So when we were talking about it today, Phil and I, we were thinking there's HVAC systems that go onto roofs, vents that go on eco roofs, certainly, solar water panels. So it's all of those things, not just the PV panels.
And this is also the item that Eli specifically is mentioning is for roofs with a pit that are pitched. So flat roof has its own set of exemptions, which is O1, and then O2 is for exemptions for a pitch of 1 and 12 more, which will be some kind of a sloped roof. And so it's possible that there could be other things besides solar panels or things that are placed in there.
Okay. Yeah, Brianna?
I'd like to jump in support of Commissioner Spivak's potential amendment here, just thinking about if we're really interested in addressing climate issues through design review. I think we want to leave more flexibility for technology to change on these fronts and not be so prescriptive from a design review perspective in terms of how we can do things on a roof that may relate to PV or HVAC systems or things that may change on a flat versus a sloped roof. So I'd recommend that we leave more flexibility here and leave that up to fire code or building code at the state level.
It's a good point. I did look at it through the lens of solar stuff on the roof. How often do other things get put on pitched roofs? I'm hard pressed to think of examples. If
There
it's not
can be
coming up.
mechanical fans, solar tubes, plumbing, vents.
Skylights.
Yeah. So for example, like the 2B is intended to probably cover things like venting systems and stuff like that for that go on to a pitched roof. So the other thing to keep in mind too is the idea was still to kind of keep the sort of the outline of the roof intact on a sloped roof in this case, and also for flat roofs we also do have some requirements that it be set back from roof edges, so it's kind of mimicking that to a certain extent.
Well, my amendment wouldn't change section B of this. It would just be section A. So I think those protections would still be there. Am I getting that right?
Right, it would just be on A for the, because somebody could choose A or B, depending on the type of equipment.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds to me like the equipment probably would be handled by B if you got some of those things you described.
So
Yes,
Eli,
sorry. Kat.
it's okay. I I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around. So if it's a pitched roof and I'm looking up at the facade of the building or the side of the roof, whether it's 3 feet back or 2 feet back or 10 feet back, I'm seeing whatever it is, most likely if it's a pitched roof. Have to be a really low pitch. So in which case I'm kind of like, who cares? Whether it's 3 feet or 2 feet or 0 feet, I'm seeing it.
Good point.
True.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
All right. So should we suggest this to make the change? Any concerns with that? Okay. Let's move on down. Thanks. So looks like we're on number 22, page 31.
Yes.
This is a little more substantial compared to the ones we've
more
been
substantial.
detailing around.
That's right. So this has to do with the thresholds. And as you recall, projects that have residential development in them, the state requires us to allow them to go through the standards track. Other projects, we can say they go through discretionary design review. In our standards track, we're proposing, staff is proposing, that only buildings that are 55 feet and lower, shorter, be able to go through the standards track. If it's over 55 feet, they get kicked into discretionary design review. And this would change that.
Right. This would increase the threshold at which that happens to 75 feet. Right. And I should check in because I was actually surprised that the city is allowed to have any discretionary review of housing based on state goal 10. Is that? But I've heard from staff that the city is allowed to create some threshold at which compulsory design review applies. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, there's quite a few different pieces of the state ORS that can apply to this, but in essence, our housing supply analysis that we did not show that we would meet our housing supply with basically buildings that did not need any bonuses and were essentially 4 stories or less. There are provisions in the state law that says you have to provide a clear and objective track, but then there's also provisions in state law that says you can have discretionary opportunities. You just can't necessarily reduce the basically the density of a project through a design review or through basically through a design review process. And so there's, like I said, there's several places that don't quite line up with the state law, but we've discussed it, and the feeling was that having this 55-foot height limit was still within our purview. The 55-foot height limit is something that is about as high as any buildings in our corridors have gone. And so buildings above that would definitely start creating a change to the kind of the skyline of these centers and corridors. And the 55-foot height limit was something that had been in place previously.
Well, I'll make the pitch for this. And this is a big change. We should think about it if we're recommending it on, is that we need a lot of housing, and we have a lot of CM3 zone that now lets you get above 55 feet. And sometimes you can incent up additional height bonus through inclusionary housing. And I'd be leery of getting situations where developers don't take that incentive to provide the affordable housing, or just don't do larger projects because they don't want to go through the discretionary design process. And this would be compulsory. So at whatever threshold we place, you're going to have to go through, you're going to have to go through the unpredictability of going through design review with the city. And it's important to have a companion thing to make sure if you go through that process, you can still get the same kind of entitlements. And that's already a little bit, that'll be a later item we talk about. But the question is whether we The reason the state law has the requirement that you need to be able to meet your housing needs through a clear and objective process is because we know from around the country that there are places where housing gets blocked through discretionary processes. And I'd rather not that. That happens in our historic districts right now in Portland. Everything built there is a clear and objective. You can't build anything clear and objective in those districts, and therefore we shouldn't or we can't include those in our housing needs that we provide for the city. And I guess I would like to suggest that in our districts, our design overlay areas, that we get up to 75 feet before you have to go compulsory design review. And I'd be open to an idea of saying that since the concept here is how big the massing of the building is, I think that there might be some companion thing saying if you're 55 feet high, I put in something in here, has to do with how long the frontage is, because that does have an impact on the public realm particularly. So that there might be a clarification to go to 75 feet of height or 55 feet of height if you've got a 150 foot long facade, because then that building has a big impact on the public realm. Any comments from others? Yeah, Kat.
My head's swimming with a whole bunch of thoughts. Generally, I support where you're going, but I have a couple of concerns. One is there was a lot of community angst about all of the work that we had done to increase heights in the corridors, and part of the deal we brokered was neighborhoods were going to get design review. So now we didn't have a discussion necessarily, I don't think, with all of those people providing testimony about is it discretionary versus standards, but that's just going through my head. Then that's also going through my head is if we can really get our standards to align with the guidelines, as I'm really hopeful we're going to get there, and that the product that comes out of the standards is as great as the product that goes through discretionary review, then why not open up the threshold greater? Because the standards are doing their job. Right. So, those are just, I guess, a little bit of my thoughts here. 75 feet's a big building. 75 feet today is, I think about that. It's almost everything. There's a lot of, think of South Waterfront projects on the south end. Those are all, so that then my other thought is, okay, what happens to the central city? Does that mean that those are also exempt or just go the standards route? And is that okay? I don't know. We're not talking about central city right now. I get it, but it just seems like you're setting up a precedent there. I guess that's where my head's going, that, okay, well, if you don't have it reviewed and doesn't need to be reviewed because we feel the standards are doing their job out in the corridors, does that mean we rethink central city thresholds maybe as well or not? I don't know. Just, again, food for thought. So kind of my head's all over on that one. But generally, I do think that I like the fact that it may promote more production of housing, and again, recognizing that there is a cost associated with discretionary review, kind of allow the dollars to be kind of offset and put into other options, whether it be, you name it, doesn't really matter. I don't have to start naming them. But so anyway, kind of all over the board there.
Ben?
Similarly, I think this is a pretty big change, which gives me pause. I guess my departure point is I do see how a lower threshold is probably a disincentive to fully utilize the height and the density allowed, at least in some cases. I think that's bound to happen, just because it's an extra step and has a cost associated with it. I'm interested in exploring it. I share the same concerns that maybe there were some conversations in the past, some deals that were brokered and promises that were made, and I think we need to be careful about honoring those. But another thing to take into account, going from 55 to 75, kind of is also carrying a certain change in how you build. You go from potentially a wood frame building to something that is maybe a mix or something else. And there's also kind of a promising technology that's coming up, the CLT or the full wood frame building, which would make a lot of sense in this climate, and it's a resource that's readily available. So that could be something that maybe can benefit from something like this. Just an additional thought. I'm definitely interested in entertaining this. It is a big change, and I would probably like to consider something along the lines as not just a height, but also a length overall. So putting some parameters behind it. I think where you're going, 150, 160 feet might be perhaps the limit. Just what it feels like. Anything above 200 feet, will be really a gigantic building.
And I should say for those comments, I agree. I think there should be a length limit as a threshold. So I said that as an option in this one, the 155 feet tall or 150 feet long would trigger compulsory design review, or 75 feet would trigger it. Either one would trigger it. I think I'd support that. And I like Kat's idea that, this does put more importance on the clear and objective design standards process to do a good job. So, my hope is to recommend this to the 3x3 as sort of a, let's make sure design standards, we can count on them for this kind of building. Any other thoughts? This is one of those cases where I'm trying to moderate and also speak my piece. So don't feel bad saying things. Yeah.
One thing you might want to consider is also in past work sessions, we did hand out some maps to folks that showed the base height and the bonus height within areas of the outside Central City.
It looked like
and
this.
that might be something to kind of help either a future discussion or just internally help you kind of grapple with the ideas.
Steph, yeah.
Just so my feelings are not entirely nonverbal, I agree with, I appreciate the refrain that our standards should match our guidelines, and that if we have 75 feet that is allowable through bonus, that we should trust in that. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this? Oriana?
I like that idea of seeing the map in terms of where the impact would be. I'd like to see the displacement analysis attached to that as well to get a better sense of where these bonuses might be making a difference in terms of more housing and balancing, I think, to some of what you're getting at in terms of incentivizing using bonuses to create more housing or to create more opportunity. I think that map would be useful in seeing where the impact would be, both in terms of creating housing and then also in terms of where in the city.
Okay. Yeah, Katie?
Yeah, I'd like a map. I always worry a little bit about these things. What could be the unintended consequence, or what would be the worst case scenario? But I appreciate the discussion that we've had. It's really helped me think about it and frame it. And
Okay.
thank you.
So thanks for the map. And it's helpful to notice that, so this is, each color is a different,
Height.
I'll let you introduce the map and identify which areas are design overview, which are not.
I also have some hard copies from when we handed this out in December, that we had more copies than we handed out in case people want.
Yeah.
I have a few hard copies if people want.
So as you know, the design overlay zone doesn't cover very much area of the city, but it's a large percentage of the growth that we're expecting in the city because it's along the centers and corridors. For this map purpose, we did not hatch the central city, which is covered entirely with design overlay zone. So the gray areas and hatched, which isn't very much, a little bit, I guess, in southwest, that's probably south of OHSU, there's no height limits for those zones. The yellow is 55 feet or less. So in other words, if it's yellow and hatched, that means all of those properties would be able to go through the standards track. The blue allows for 56 to 65 foot heights. So those properties with blue and hatch means that they would go through discretionary design review if they maximize their height. Some of those properties could probably do the FAR under that height limit, right? And then the red, like out in past Gateway, because we're looking at past Gateway in the East Corridor, those would go through discretionary design review. Am I reading this right?
And we have a map that also shows the bonus height, where the main difference is.
So this is, hold on a second. So that's the base height. And then of course there's bonus heights. And this is the bonus maximum heights. So same legend. And where are the main differences?
So the
Phil?
main differences occur on the interstate corridor, a little bit on MLK, the Lentz area, and mostly along Sandy, where those basically the main changes where the blue turned to red.
Oh, that's right. There's a lot. Yeah, you can see
because
there's a lot more blue there on Sandy, for example, from Central City out to 50th or so. There's a lot of blue, and here it turns red.
Yeah.
If they take advantage of their bonus heights.
And
taking
much
advantage
of
of bonus
much of this is because the CM2 zone would have a 45-foot base and a 55-foot bonus. And then many of the areas that were sort of in the blue were oftentimes a higher density residential zone that potentially would have an additional height limit with the Better Housing by Design piece. Maybe it would bump up. But in a lot of the multi-dwelling residential zones, it probably would be feasible to meet the maximum FAR without going over 55 feet, because there's definitely a greater cushion between the maximum height and the maximum floor area in those zones than there is, say, in the CM2.
Mike.
Yeah, if I'm reading the map correctly, it becomes super important when we start talking about the South Reach. When you look at the area along the greenway that's in blue in the South Portland neighborhood.
Right here.
Yeah, the higher you get with regard to the impact on the greenway, which is very narrow there at the moment. We're hoping will be expanded. So that's a really important case in point where height and width of in this case, the greenway would be really important consideration.
Mm-hmm.
As I look at these maps, I'm seeing the red and the blue areas, which are the sort of that are hatched. That's kind of the area in play with this amendment, is my understanding. And I think those areas we should make sure not to underbuild them. And so I guess I'm feeling like being able to make stuff there clear and objective would be beneficial, so people use the bonuses, and that we can. We already just updated our mixed-use zones codes to include some building articulation and other things in the base code. These places would still be required to meet the standards and get enough points. So I guess I'm going to support my proposal here and kick it to see if people would like to agree with me to kick it to the 3x3 to see what they think.
And I guess I'm not sure if that characterization of underbuilding is true, because I'm looking at like CM2 with bonus FAR is 4-1. CM3 is 5-1. So can you not do a 5-1 building at 55 feet and lower? I think our proposal of 55 feet of having
You
the
can't,
absolute.
lot coverage. You couldn't get that high, if I'm getting it correctly.
Then I don't have my little cheat sheet. It doesn't say what the lot coverage is for CM3 is 100%, wouldn't it be?
Once again, it kind of depends. It probably depends on where it's located. If there may be a setback, if it's adjoining
CM2 is 85%,
a residential,
I think.
if it's joining a lower density residential, there may be a setback that keeps you from doing 100% building coverage. But there is always that wiggle room between the floor area and the height. The other thing that this doesn't, it shows a little bit, but for example, a lot of the red there out on East Burnside, east of Gateway, which isn't shown there. We have a separate map for that. But a lot of that red is, the East Corridor Plan District, which has some pretty significant height limits. I think maybe even up to 100 feet tall, but the FAR may not be that. You might be dealing with a 4-1 or 6-1 FAR, and so. If you were going to go 100 feet tall, you definitely wouldn't be covering the whole lot.
Right.
So
That would be irrelevant to this amendment because once you're over 75, you're in design review no matter what, right?
So obviously, our intent wasn't to impede housing development from going through standards either, but it's to say that a short, squattier building could go through standards, but if it's a tall building, it has a bigger impact. Therefore, through discretionary review, that was like the overall concept.
And it was balancing the public. I mean, I think you guys, Kat brought up the bargain that was being brought up during the mixed use zones and things like that. And what we kept hearing during the DOZA process was that actually 55 feet was too tall. We should be 45, 40. And so the sense was, if we got much shorter than that, then we potentially would have a situation where we would have discretionary review potentially impacting needed housing. And so we thought 55 was still a good compromise.
Okay. Any more comments before we do a straw poll? Okay. Who thinks we should recommend this to the 3x3? Looks like we're recommending it forward. Thanks. So we'll skip some consents and go to number 25.
Yes, number 25. Oops, sorry, I'm totally losing my place here.
Sorry for jumping in, but a real quick one. I'm guessing you didn't by chance have anybody test like a 75-foot tall building using standards when you were doing the tests?
I don't think
I was
we
gonna say it'd
did.
be a
No.
great thing to bring to
No.
the 3x3 if you had it. But
No.
And part of
we-
it is that
yeah.
we picked sites and used the programming that the site was allowing, not the maximum allowed development. So the one in Hillsdale, if you remember that one, was a 1-story building because that's what we figured the market could bear in that location, and how was the standards going to, help that building.
sorry, just
Yeah.
curious. Thanks.
So we're on number 25, and now we're switching all the way over to the design review chapter on page 133. And I think, Commissioner Bortolasa, I'm going to let you explain this one, but I think looking at page 133 probably helps.
So this was a response to comments, I believe, from both BDS and Design Commission. That the thresholds for 1 and 2, exterior alteration to existing developments were too low. I was hoping for staff to make an alternative recommendation on this. I don't know if BDS, if you have anything to suggest on the matter.
And I was confused looking at this. So it sounds like we're talking about in the central city, correct?
Correct.
We're talking about exterior alterations to existing development. So that's that second broader row. And is 1 and 2, the number 1 and 2 over the thresholds in that third column? Is that what we're,
That's correct.
okay.
Is there
So I didn't have an alternate proposal. What I was trying to grapple with was looking at what the amount of alteration to a facade would be done with either number 1 or number 2. And my thought was, so number 1 is basically alteration affecting any aspect of the street facing facade, whether it's the ground level, the 5th floor, whatever, but it affects at least 50% of that street facing facade, but in no case less than 5,000 square feet of that facade. And I was seeing that as essentially if you had a building that had about 100 feet of facade, that would essentially be, you were to get to the 5,000 square foot threshold where you would start actually using the 50% piece. That would probably be about 5 stories, 4 to 5 stories of a building that had a 100-foot street facade, because basically 100 feet times 50 feet up would get you the 5,000 square feet. So to hit the 50% piece, you're probably looking at, something that affects at least multiple stories of the facade and is on a larger building. Otherwise you'd be subject to that 5,000 square feet. So I guess that's where I was having problems coming up with another proposal, because in my view, that seemed like a pretty good area of a facade to impact.
And that
where
would
it would
warrant
trigger the requirement to go through and talk it over with the design commission. Similarly, with the number 2, the idea that it affects at least 200 lineal feet of the ground floor street-facing facade, that would be essentially the full block of one street facade, which to me is a pretty big impact on the public realm. So I didn't know if there was a larger threshold that should be looked at, or whether we should follow what we're proposing in outside Central City, which is that any alteration is a type 2.
Well, I was just struck by the fact that both recommending bodies had the same recommendation. And again, I'm not quite sure what the threshold should be. Perhaps there is an opportunity to get a little bit more feedback from Design Commission.
Yeah. And I can
On this.
speak
Yeah,
to it as well.
jump in.
So our thoughts were, as far as altering a facade, we've had a number of reviews that have been type 3, recladding an existing building that went to Design Commission, changing the storefront on an entire ground floor of a building downtown. The scope of these projects and their impact on the public realm may be large, but you're essentially working with an existing structure that's already that already sits within its context, and you're talking about altering it, in a minor way, and just doesn't seem to rise to the level of occasion for Design Commission review, especially an appeal to City Council to talk about altering the cladding of a building. So since there's not much changing and not as much impact on the surrounding neighborhood because it's not new development, staff felt that any alteration to a building would be type 2 would seem to be appropriate. In terms of adding to an existing building, again, that is adding a new element, which could have impacts on the context or the adjacent or neighboring properties. So we felt that maybe there's some square footage threshold that if you add so much to an existing building, it would trigger a type 3. A good example of that is the Mercy Corps building. They did an addition onto that building, but it was basically another building totally attached to it. So while it was an addition, it was almost a brand new building that had a significant impact on its surrounding neighbors. So maybe there's just a threshold of square footage that's added that could be the difference between a type 2 and a type 3. But for alterations for an existing, a type 2 seems to be appropriate because you're working within the existing framework of a structure.
So our current proposal has number 3 there for the addition, which makes it a type 3 if the addition is both to an existing building that's over 45 feet in height and also adds 25,000 square feet of floor area. So I guess the possible idea would be to keep that as a type 3, but to not have any kind of distinction for just a straight alteration and just have the alteration be a type 2.
Any thoughts? Yes.
I completely agree with Stacy's comment. Staff is extremely capable of reviewing, I think, alterations to an existing building, and so leaving that as a type 2 and letting the additions go through the type 3 makes a ton of sense to me.
Any other thoughts?
I think keeping the 5,000 makes sense, but I agree with going with a lower tier.
All right. Any concerns with that recommendation? It sounds like not hearing it. So let's shift those to being type 2. The first 2 items there. What's next?
and the type 3, the way the addition
Okay.
is written there.
Just the addition would remain a type 3 with those thresholds.
With those thresholds as written. Okay.
And
great.
alterations of existing would be type 2.
Great. So we're done with thresholds. Yay.
Hooray.
Excellent. So moving on to process. Remember, thresholds is who's going through which process. Now, process is really about the design review process. It's not about the standards. It's not about building permits. It's when you're when discretionary design review is triggered, and how are we improving the process for that. Number 26 is a consent item. So we move on to 27, and the Request here is to add one member of the design commission must be from a sustainability profession. Commissioner Schultz.
I got a little distracted about a headline on Central City 2035 appeal. Oh,
just
I just
distracted
was
the
about. I
entire
was sending
staff.
it to you, Joe, to ask you to speak to this,
we
thinking you knew.
online?
I'll let Joe speak to it because I'm sure he has all the scoop here in just a sec. Anyway, so I'm sorry. Which item are we on?
We're on the
number 27.
Yours.
Number 27,
Page
about the
113.
list of who can serve
Yep.
on the design commission.
Well, really, Mike's brought this up a bunch of times, and I agree. I think saying that one member of the design commission being somebody in the sustainability kind of profession would be great. This commission has been greatly enhanced by kind of a whole variety of perspectives on what we do, and I think kind of just having that lens or that perspective, and maybe sustainability isn't exactly it, and we need to nuance, what that means. But I guess whether it's understanding kind of integration of sustainable features with the design, or understanding more of the natural environment, more so than just a landscape design perspective. I guess I'm open to kind of those thoughts and opinions, but just kind of taking that different perspective and bringing it to the conversation would be great.
Yeah, and I have recommended that on a number of occasions. I feel the same way about the Planning Sustainability Commission, actually. I think a natural resource background is what I had in mind. We've got a great landscape architect, and maybe there are a couple on the design commission now, which is great, but that doesn't necessarily equate to issues related to natural resources. Julie Livingston is in the back of the room, and I'm remembering a robust conversation that the design commission had regarding design guideline 10. And actually, several of the commissioners expressed concern about the fact that they didn't feel they had the expertise to actually make a decision or recommendation on some of those issues related to resilience and so forth. So I really do think there is a reason to have that conversation and to look. And environmental is way too broad. I think it really does need to relate to the landscape, to natural resources.
Well, and I guess that's kind of where I'm like, but I also think bringing a perspective, understanding sustainable technologies from that conversation that we were hearing could also be helpful. So is it two positions? I don't know. Is it, you kind of take one or the other for one position? Like I said, I think there's some nuance there and some thought that needs to go into the suggestion. But just can't hurt to encourage that other perspective.
So to clarify a little bit about this, right now there's 7 members of the Design Commission. I don't know if those of you who have page 113 on volume 2. Of those 7 members, 2 of them are proposed to be required from specific areas. One is a representative of RAC, and one is to represent the public at large and not be affiliated with the areas of expertise. Then the other 5 members can be taken from a pool of subject experts. And so I guess the question I'm asking is, are you wanting to pull one of those 5 members away and create another dedicated member, or do you want, of those 5 members, you want to add to that pool of subject experts?
I guess I was leaning towards a dedicated member of kind of parsing out personally. Mm-hmm. So you'd be pulling from the 5.
Yeah, I was as well. This is obviously a good conversation for the 3x3.
Yes.
Could a landscape architect be in that? No, different. So the landscape architect is part of the pool, but this new expertise that we're seeking, this natural resource expertise that we can work on is...
I think they're different.
They are different.
As I said, I think it's great. We've got a landscape architect, or maybe 2 on the commission now. But
and are you
different?
Oriana?
I'd like to echo the more expansive definition of sustainability to include sustainable technology. I think as we start to talk more and more about net zero buildings or passive house design, it may be valuable to have someone who understands how that interacts with design. I think the natural resources piece is really key, but in terms of what we're going to need to do for long-term climate mitigation, it's going to be in how we address windows and balconies and solar panels and different elements of the buildings themselves. So I think that's a valuable perspective as part of the design commission process.
And I don't disagree with that, but I think actually, based on my listening in on several design commission conversations, that those issues are actually pretty well covered by the design commission. That's my takeaway.
I've not been to these meetings. Does anyone else have take on, like, I guess, Kat, with your amendment proposal, would that shift the makeup of the design commission from what it has been, or would it be covered?
No, I think it's a dedicated person who's not necessarily an architect.
Mm-hmm.
It's more technical expertise, and like I said, I can see an argument for a sustainable expert, like a technical expert, as well as a natural resources, individual. And like I said, whether that means that's two positions, I don't know. I don't have the answer there. I'm not here to say one or the other, but I do think there's some technical expertise that could be helpful to the design commission. This goes way, way, way back, and maybe as an example is when vinyl windows kind of first came on the scene. There was a lot of debate at design commission. We as a community weren't really supportive of them and what they look like. But about the time I joined the commission, it started to become pretty apparent that they were extremely energy efficient. And we were still struggling with the fact that we didn't all like the looks of them, but they're extremely energy efficient. And maybe that conversation would have taken hold a little bit sooner. And I think that's what I'm getting at. So it's kind of just poking at some things that somebody who's deeply embedded in the field of what we need to be doing to bring our buildings forward in a more thoughtful climate action point of view could be kind of just poking that conversation and encouraging the commission to maybe think things through in a little bit different lens. That's all.
Well, I guess I'm hearing articulation for two different kinds of positions to recommend. And I'm trying to figure out how to parse that out. I'm hearing one case for the design professional. I'm not saying that quite right.
Sustainability,
sustainability,
technology.
which is not always the same skill set as a natural resource person. So
No, it's not.
yeah, it's oftentimes different people. So any suggestions on what to do about this?
I just have a broader question. Kat, having served on design commission, you may have some. My understanding is they sometimes have trouble recruiting candidates. It's a very technical, very time-consuming position. And if you start pigeonholing the positions, while it makes great sense to have someone with that expertise on it, are you going to get stuck in this? Well, we have someone who kind of knows that, but they're not really an expert. They're willing to serve. And I'm just worried you're going to end up with lots of vacancies while you search for just the right expertise if you get too specific in what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Another idea that had come up way back when was an East Portland representative. As we saw on the map, there's a lot of design review overlay zones, and with our new thresholds, the design commission could definitely see more projects in East Portland. And it was precisely for that idea, Commissioner Backrack, that you mentioned that it's hard to get people to volunteer. It's a lot of hours, a lot of work, and that's one of the reasons why we have just the 5 and then one at large, and not trying to dedicate too many positions and too many slots. I think the Development Review Advisory Committee has specific slots for each position, and I'm always noticing that there's 3 or 4 that are empty.
Okay.
Well, and to your point, by the way, I want to make it very clear, this is not in any way to be construed that there's a criticism of the Design Commission. In fact, I think they're one group. I couldn't imagine what advisory groups or commissions put in more time than we do, and the Design Commission definitely does. I've sat through, again, many hours of conversations. So I don't know how to resolve this either, but I do think that it's important to highlight the need for these kinds of expertise.
Okay, how can we get? Do you want to get a recommendation on this?
Well, I guess my recommendation is I'd love to just talk it through at the 3x3 and just kind of see if there's some suggestions that we can all come up with. Maybe it's just encouraging, I don't know, broader outreach for applications and into different communities and however the selection's done, just tweaking the lens a little bit at that time that people are being selected and adding them just to the list of, hey, it's not just finance, but natural resources and sustainability are also really highly encouraged.
Well, since Kat and Mike are on
Yeah.
the 3x3, that sounds good. That sounds good to me. Thank you. Number 28.
Okay, so 28 and 29 are very similar suggestions, and the suggestion here, as you know, for legislative changes for the design guidelines, the recommending body is the Design Commission. Is that what we're talking about? And yeah,
For guidelines.
for guidelines for the design commission. The recommendation here is that either the PSC gets established as an additional recommending body, or that at least the PSC gets a briefing so that they can give their recommendation to the design commission. So I think I have, Commissioner Spivak and Schultz made the recommendations.
I learned about this issue as I looked at what it takes to establish a historic district or a design district. And at least in a historic district, the criteria for establishing a district are several pages long, but they don't mention equity in the list. And I think that from when I saw that, and I've realized that we should make sure the city applies an equity lens to the creation of these districts. And I know that the commissions, Design Commission and Historic Management Commission, care about equity, and we are specifically tasked with that. And so I thought that having us, the PSC, be a review body, a supplementary review body in recommending changes to those districts and how they get designated would be helpful to avoid situations where we have parts of the city get overlays that maybe don't further goals of equity.
So let me clarify really quick. I think there's two things. There's districts and how it's mapped, and then there's guidelines and what the words say. For historic districts, when Brandon comes with his project on historic resource code amendments, he'll have that rewritten, and maybe we can put off historic districts to that conversation and who gets to define. And I think he was telling us today that we haven't established a local historic district since 1970, so he's kind of reinventing that process. For design overlay, it is the Planning Commission who is the recommending body to City Council about expanding or contracting the design, the D overlay on the map. So as you know, we're talking about.
Yes, I should say conservation districts is the other one. Are we the recommending body for conservation districts also?
I don't think
we are.
so. I think that's the Landmarks Commission.
But we would would we recommend putting it on the map?
You don't have a formal role. I don't.
We have no
think.
role in establishing conservation districts or historic districts, as far as I know.
Right. I think that's correct.
Okay, so that's
And
the
so, and that's where I would. That's what I would say. If we could hold the conservation and historic district to Brandon's project, because that's how those districts are going to be created, the process and what the criteria are, because everybody should be operating off that same criteria. If we could have that conversation in his project, I think that would be helpful.
I'm not sure I'm going with that now, but I'll comments from Oriana.
No.
Okay. I mean, I guess my question on that is, right now we're updating our code update is the review bodies as part of this code
The
update.
design commission review bodies for design review, not all the other commissions and all of their purviews.
Okay, understood. Point taken.
Yeah, can we do that? Okay. Now, getting back to guidelines and what the words say, the design commission is the recommending body on the design guidelines. And I think what I understood both of 28 and 27 to me is, could the PSC have a formal role in the design guidelines?
Yep, and I had the same question, but from a different perspective, and that is, for example, the Greenway, Willamette River Greenway. There are some significant natural resource issues that I think it would benefit from, presuming that that expertise was on the PSC, to provide for us to have the ability to provide input to the design commission. I think would be helpful.
Can you help me
So
parse
there's
this?
a presumption there, however.
Yeah.
I think I can
Kat,
parse it.
thanks.
Maybe. At least what I was trying to go back to is again the notion that what's in the zoning code, our standards, are closely tied to the guidelines. So if there's a point in time, at the moment we're all doing it in tandem, it's really great. But if there's a point in time in the future where some design guidelines are being rewritten, I think it's important to make sure that there's some process that ties it back to the planning commission so that we have standards that then pick up or parallel potentially those design guidelines. At the moment, it could be completely done by design commission and then planning commission would never hear about it. I'm not saying that would ever happen, but it just seems like if we're formalizing a process and we're trying to make these items linked, we somehow need to put into the code that there's a process that the design commission comes to, at least for a briefing to the planning commission to let the planning commission know what they're about to do. And planning commission can then decide whether standards need to change in alignment with what the design guidelines are doing and or make a recommendation to the design commission about, hey, we're concerned about this, that, or the other, and in what you're suggesting, would suggest a conversation. That's where I was going with it.
I would say that I'm willing to drop mine based on the fact that this historic district is coming to us in about a month. And I support what Kat's suggesting, which is more the purview of this project and just looking ahead to make sure it's handled with our review if design guidelines change down the road. Any other thoughts on this? Joe?
Yeah, just to add to that, the historic code changes that are going to be coming to you are really the venue for the issues you're raising. And there's a desire to even reach beyond what Brandon's bringing in this first round to straighten out how districts are created even more and define the roles of the local government, more or less the Planning and Sustainability Commission. So
Great. So my hope is that when that packet comes to us, this will be on the table in that packet. Will it be?
not in the first round.
Well, then I guess I might have to have some issue. I guess
What the districts are we talking about? How
would the review body for districts be part of packet one? So in other words, this amendment that I'm
think there
willing
was
to withdraw
there was some
will be an opportunity to
conversation.
bring it up again in that code update.
Excuse me, but Eli, so the concern is changes to the design guidelines?
No, my concern
or
is whether
designation of the districts.
whether PSC has a role in designating districts. Currently, we do not.
No, and currently we do not at the state level. So that's what I'm saying. The change has to local districts. We have a role, but the national.
Oh, I'm talking about local districts.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
just conservation districts and local historic districts. I'm wondering whether the potential role of the PSC as a recommending body on that could be part of the process that Brandon's working on right now.
And I just need to check with him. Honestly, I don't
yes,
know.
he
the
did
full
share that with
range.
us today.
He's
He-
bringing
he-
that in.
Yeah, he shared that with us today, that it was Historic Landmarks Commission to the PSC to City Council, but of course he hasn't.
If that's the case, then it's being considered already.
but
So I'll
I'm
withdraw
sure
mine. And
So
Any-
related to the guideline piece, what I'm curious about, and this kind of gets about the legislative land use reviews and assignment review bodies, would the PSC be comfortable in basically having the design commission make the recommendation with input from the PSC, or is the idea that there should be a joint recommendation? Because it's sort of a little bit, one is, kind of having the PSC
Yeah.
feed into the design commission as the main recommending body
what do you think, Kat?
versus having to both.
I'm not sure, which is why I'd love to talk about it at the 3x3. How's that for a punt?
Okay.
When we come up with when we come back in a few weeks with our table of amendments, it's all just going to say discuss with 3x3.
Perhaps.
Because we've been doing it informally, right? Every the briefings that staff bring, and of course the design commissioners don't get together and write a bunch of guidelines to push through the legislative process. It's BPS doing it, and staff will be like, "Hey, they're getting rid of all these guidelines or adding all these guidelines. What are we doing with the standards?" And we would
So-
work on
Yeah,
it.
so let's put that into code somehow, some way.
So that we will have
So
some
you're
role.
okay with a briefing and the informal process,
Potentially.
but codified.
But I'd like to talk
potentially.
about it at 3x3.
Okay.
Okay, so we're recommending some role for the PSC in future updates to the guidelines, to be determined through the 3x3.
Let me ask you this: do you want to hear all the testimony on that, or is it okay for the design commission to hear the testimony on that? Because for us, it's who is the recommending body and which is the first evidentiary hearing that we need to send notice to, and where should we tell the public to come to influence decision makers? That's the main thing.
Well, so if I'm to use this process as the lens, it's perhaps going to both. And maybe there needs to be a joint hearing like we did, because the standards are affected and the guidelines are affected. So I'm not trying to say that, design, where PSC is taking over design guidelines. It's not it at all. But they're tied together. So it kind of depends on what's going on in the design guidelines. And maybe, you know what, if by chance down the line, or maybe we're going to find this out as we kind of near the end of this process, we have issues where the standards and the guidelines aren't coming together, it does need to be a joint hearing so that we can all hash it out and figure it out together.
And you feel that same way for gateway design guidelines that don't have their own set of standards, for example, or Central City that doesn't have their own set of standards?
Potentially. Maybe they should. Or maybe there should be a standard in there. I mean, I don't know. I guess which is why I'd love to just parse this out of the 3x3 instead of right now tonight.
Okay, I'm just trying to get as much information to make move the
that's
conversation forward.
So we'll give it at least 10 minutes on the 3x3.
10 minutes.
Joking. Let's,
Okay, moving on to 31. Is that
Yes.
what we're doing? Thanks. So item number 31, this is another probably big one, and this has to do with the number of DARs. So to refresh everybody's memory, design review is a land use review and is subject to state laws about land use reviews, and the city needs to make decisions within 120 days. We also offer a service to applicants where they can basically set up an appointment with the design commission. That's called a design advice request. And they come and present their application to the design commission. The design commission gives them advice so that they can better prepare their land use review, their design review application. So this is coming in for the design review. Our recommendation was that design advice requests are limited to one per application. And Commissioner Bertolaso is suggesting that they not be limited to one.
Where this is coming from is the idea that additional feedback and input early on in a project can really help put it in the right track. Sometimes it's not even clear what the track of that project would be, whether it's standards or guidelines. Maybe that shifts in mid-course, and you might have already had a DAR, and you not being able to go back for another one could potentially compromise the course of the project. I think it's something that came up quite a bit in testimony. I think Design Commission also recommended that. It seems to make sense. It's a very valuable input that you get early on and saves a lot of time and effort to all parties.
Other thoughts?
And just to clarify, there's no restriction, especially if a project shifts focus or really changes its program, that somebody could just come in and start the process over again and submit a new DAR. So that is still an opportunity. The idea is, based on this chart that we were working off, is the idea that the DAR that is for the same project doesn't keep coming back for additional sessions that then essentially cause decisions or perceived decisions on certain aspects of it before it actually comes in for the land use hearing. So it's this idea that you're getting further and further along to the point where, the perception amongst the applicant and others is that a lot of the main, what would be normally decided during the land use hearing is actually already sort of been discussed. And then you get to the land use hearing and you're just focused, on details that maybe are at just the design development phase, which are very, small pieces. So similar to the pre-app, it's the idea that the DAR is supposed to be that initial set of advice, and it's possible that the advice could be, you're not meeting any of our, that the way it's proposed, you're not meeting any of our guidelines. You're going to have to come back and start over, and then they would start over.
I'm interested to hear other people. I don't have experience with this to have an idea.
My response and I don't remember how long ago it was, but there was a presentation that was made regarding additional opportunities for the public to really understand what is going on with these DARs. That's really critical for the very reason Phil just described. As citizens, you want to know. And it's hard enough already for a lot of folks to really follow and track the process. So public participation in that process is really critical.
That was one of our reasons for proposing a limit of one.
Yeah.
So when we started looking and when we were working on this, the neighborhood contact requirement was starting to go in. We were having conversations about that too. So before a type 3 review is submitted, an applicant needs to do a pre-application conference, a neighborhood contact requirement, and that's where they go and have it in the neighborhood and hear feedback so that the applicant can change the process. The design advice request is optional. And then you come in for the land use review. So if you're a very involved member of the public that wants to participate, you could come to all 4 meetings, but it's only the last one, the one for the land use review, where you have its official testimony and where you have standing to appeal the decision. The other 3 are different types of meetings that serve different purposes.
I'm interested in the case for the one limit. Is it to protect design? I guess, Phil, you described some of it. So people don't get the expectations up that they're just going to coast through the land use process. Is it partly to preserve staff time from
this
too?
whole thing has to do with what our proposal is to align the city's process with an applicant's process. And this diagram that we developed really resonated with, I think, a lot of applicants, that the architectural and design process is a 4-stage process. It goes through concept design, schematic, design development, and construction documents. So what we're trying to do is align the land use review and all of these pre-meetings to the stage of the process where the members of the public can actually influence what is occurring. Everyone wants everyone wants information as soon as possible. That was very clear. As a matter of fact, when we did our discussion draft and talked to the public, in one of our options, we had said, how about no DAR? And the public was like, no, we really want to be in there early. So that was clear that there was a lot of people who were fans of it. But it was also clear that folks weren't differentiating between that and the public hearing, and not understanding which one they were providing testimony at and which one they were just providing comments at. And oftentimes when applications were doing multiple DARs and then one hearing, they were like, am I supposed to come to all 5 of these meetings? So by limiting it to one, we figured we're not extending that concept design phase for on the applicant's part to more months. So we're trying to fit into their 3 months, that they're working on, and not, if we do more DARs, that means you're extending that 3 months longer and longer and longer, because you're hopefully still trying to, or the design commission is still trying to influence that concept design. So I'm not sure if it's a perfect tool, but it's the best tool that we could come up with. And, receiving feedback from the design commission that is know this design doesn't quite meet it, make sure that you're stepping back to this or whatever that feedback is direction. It's not a lack of direction.
I think aligning the design process, the applicant's process with the approval process, I think is a great principle. And I think generally speaking, I think this is a great direction, and it kind of reflects, concept, schematic, design. That those are the typical phases of design. It runs under the assumption that design is a linear process, which it can be. Ideally, you want it to be. Unfortunately, it's not always the case. There are things that every project's different, and some projects are pretty straightforward. It's pretty clear what the program is and where you're going to end up at the very beginning, and it's really a matter of focusing on design and skin and things like that. Some other projects aren't as clear because there's context issues, there's access issues, there's a whole number of factors that can influence the actual design, and depending on the information that you have or the shifts in program, many other factors, meeting with the neighborhood, learning more, so on and so forth, that process is somewhat circular. You have to go back and perhaps reassess the program, reassess what the key elements are. And some of these may stay, some of these may change. So having the opportunity to be able to go back and perhaps take a step back and have some feedback is really invaluable, because the project may look from the surface that it's moving ahead and going, towards a hearing, but in reality, maybe it's really back here. And having a limit of one would mean that you make a lot of assumptions. So what we see here in the diagram, those elements that are supposed to be fixed and kind of moving towards the right, you have less and less that are changing. That might actually not be true. You might be further on, but you're running on a lot of assumptions that perhaps hasn't been vetted with staff.
Well, they can vet with staff. We were talking, the DAR is always with the commission, just to clarify that, and they are working with staff throughout that.
Ben's comments are well taken. However, I'm going to take the citizens' perspective, especially being involved in a process right now that, even having been around for a while, I find a bit confusing, and the citizens certainly do on particular development. And so I'd say, if we're going to bend over one way or another, it should be toward being very, very clear with citizens who are interested in a particular development, so they have the opportunity to really understand what's going on. And I think you did a very good job of describing the rationale that you have.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask this of Stacy, but in some ways, Mike, you might be a better person to ask. So is this a recent experience that you...
Right in the middle of it.
Okay. So after my time on the design commission, Julie now reads, as she starts a meeting, the chair, I think, a great preamble explaining the process, which we didn't do so clearly when I was a commissioner. So I guess having heard that, do you think it added clarity, or is it still, or are you still seeing people or hearing people in your community kind of expressing confusion?
I'm still hearing from people in the community expressing confusion, although I will say that you're right, Julie does a great job of that, but prior to that meeting, people are unclear where they are in the process. It's a big issue. And as I said at one of our previous meetings, I thought BDS did a great presentation on trying to better explain the DAR process and how folks can feed into it.
Stacy?
I just wanted to add that similar to Julie's preamble, we have made a lot of effort, because we did hear these concerns early on about better distinguishing DAR, which is a non-discretionary process that's for advice for the public, and trying to make those two processes very clear, not only in the hearings room with boards and information. We're doing handouts to limit the information that applicants can bring, so that they don't keep designing and developing and getting this pre-approval that was kind of reflective of a time when we were in a big boom. Projects were moving so fast that they kept on this linear timeline, and we're just getting this kind of pre-approval. So those were different times, and we've done a lot of work in our admin work to really clarify and distinguish the two processes and educate the public. I agree we still have a long way to go, but we do recognize that distinction is needed and are working on it.
I have one question maybe for Phil. If someone designs a building and they do a DAR and they get feedback that they really got to mix it up a lot, so they start again. Does start again mean redesign the building, do another DAR, or does it mean go to a pre-app and then what does start again mean if that's an option on the table?
I think it probably depends on the scope of the change as to, I think a lot of times pre-apps, they may still use an existing pre-app, but I have seen situations where literally a building went from, a 6-story to 12-story or something along those lines. And I think in those are the kind of cases where potentially I don't know that our code says you have to come in and do another pre-app, but I think if the scope of the building is such that the different bureaus would have different responses to a pre-app, they should probably do both the pre-app and a new DIR. I think the idea of the conversation about if the design commission go through a DAR, the design commission says we need to change this and change that. I mean, if it's more of a simplify the facade, consider your main entrances, do something about the mechanical equipment, those kinds of things. To me, that is advice, and that's where somebody could probably take that and move forward with the land use review. I don't know that they'd have to come back and have a second, or come back and have a continuation of the DAR and say, here's what I did with the mechanical equipment.
That's kind of what I'm getting to is if someone does what Ben described, if someone starts spinning, they change it around a little bit, and then they present it again and say, I want another DAR, it's a new project. Someone has to make a call on whether it's really a new project, and they get a second DAR, or you had your one, you're done. I'm trying to figure out how you make that call. I don't know how you make that call. Yeah, Stacey.
So right now we don't have a limit on DARs.
Right. I know this. I'm anticipating this potential
right.
rule.
So my understanding, if there was a limit on one, they would just reapply with another fee and get another number and go through the process again. That's my understanding of how that would work.
Isn't that the same as a second DAR?
It would be
or
a
what's the
different
difference?
case number. Maybe Phil could expand a little bit.
What's the
on-
difference?
I mean, I think you're talking about almost like a building permit. Someone comes in for a house on the site and then later decides they're not going to build that and they're going to build a store instead. It's, we're scrapping that permit and starting a new permit.
Is there a permit assigned at this point?
No, it's a DAR number.
But it's the same kind of concept that if somebody comes in for a permit for a house and they're like, you know what, actually I want this to be a triplex. It's often the building folks will turn around and say that this permit was not, you have to change from an RS to CO permit in those cases. But if the scope changes, they often say you need to come in and resubmit for a permit. It'd be that same idea. I mean, basically we're saying that it's limited to one meeting per application. So I think it because it's an optional DAR still, it can be potentially still up to the applicant to say, I'm going to submit another application.
It seems like
the thing
that
that
this could be gamed.
yeah.
I guess you can put a limit on it, but someone could just say it's a new project. Here, review it again. So I'm not sure.
And I'm not
I
part
think
of
what we
what we're
need to
getting.
know from the commission, though, the more apt point is the limit of one, given the rationale that I was describing. Does that make sense? And we would codify that and figure out the loopholes and how people could game the system afterwards. But the policy decision itself is, does a limit of one make sense given all the other meetings that an applicant needs to go through and other avenues of input that the public has to the land use review?
We should probably figure out how to give you some guidance on that.
And I'm just gonna, in the staff report, we had written what the benefits were. So we did feel that allowing applicants to get early direction at the concept design stage from decision makers is why we want to allow for DARs and support that system. We want to support appropriate conversations occurring at appropriate times in these stages. So, We don't want the public calling us at construction documents when everything has been figured out. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to respect the public's time and clearly direct their effort and input to the point of the process where that input can have influence on the applicant and decision makers. And then finally, we're trying to ensure that the meetings designed to support a successful land use review don't undermine the land use review itself.
Okay, I think we should move forward with any other questions on this, or we have a proposal to say you can do more than one DAR. I guess that's the question.
I have to say, I'm. It's another one I struggle with. I get both sides of it. I think, for the public's perspective, just the one DAR is probably helpful. I have coworkers and colleagues and clients who would probably not be very happy with that statement about limiting to one DAR, though. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. In general, though, what I'm really sitting here struggling with is that we're in front of Design Commission today so much more than we ever were in the 90s. Why? Are our buildings just that much? I mean, so are we seeing that much of an improvement from when buildings came through in the 90s? When I, was first bringing projects through, we would often get through in one hearing. We'd be in front of Design Commission one time. That was, and believe me, it was like this huge celebration. Maybe two. Rarely did we ever have 3 land use review hearings. So, I'm sitting here looking and, today, what's often happening is you have a DAR, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, and actually our industry actually requested DAR so that we weren't coming in so late. So this isn't a comment on that, but, we're having DARs, and then we're having still multiple land use review hearings. So it's just like, what has happened in the process to make it so time consuming? And this is a great explanation, but by the way, this still doesn't line up with our process. And I'd love to talk with you about that some other time. This graphic that I'm seeing on this board. Often, so for example, what I'm seeing for concept design here, a client that I'm doing concept design for doesn't even own the land. They're not going to come in for a pre-app when they don't own the land. They don't purchase the land. We do a concept design, then they go purchase, then we start schematic design. So we're not drawing. We can't come in and talk to the city because there's not a deal yet. So there's some intricacies here that don't quite align today. I get your general point, and the general point's kind of aligning, but the timing still isn't quite working, and we just are in front of Design Commission a lot these days. These days, meaning decades. Even when I was on Design Commission, we were calling people back. So I feel like there's a bigger thing going on there that I don't understand that maybe answers this whole question about DAR. Like I said, there's advantages to DAR, no doubt about it. Getting in front of Design Commission early is really helpful in the design process, and that's what it's really all about.
Okay, well, I think I'm just looking at the next page, and we have a lot of discuss items there. So let's do a straw poll for the proposal from Ben to allow more than one DAR. Supportive of that? Opposed? A lot of people not so sure.
I just don't know. Sorry.
So we're not sure where we go with this one.
1 to 3 by 3.
Okay. Unfortunately so. But the next one's about DARs also. Maybe we'll get some number 32.
Yes, 32 is about famous footnote number 2. So in volume 2, if you look at page 133, and this was about affordable housing projects in particular, right? Yeah. So unfortunately, at the very top of page 135 is footnote 2, and this has to do with, we've established the thresholds for which projects are big and should go through type 3 review and which projects should go through type 2 review. As part of the housing emergency, City Council passed an ordinance that said for affordable housing projects that go through the city's bureau, PHB, Portland Housing Bureau, that they should be able to choose to go through a lesser review. So what's in that ordinance currently is that despite the fact that the project is big enough to trigger a type 3, the Housing Bureau can choose to go through a type 2X, which gives staff a little extra time, and a required DAR. When does that expire, that ordinance? It expires
Yeah,
sometime.
it expires in April of 21, I think, as part of the housing emergency expiration.
So this ordinance went into effect. Some projects could have chosen to go through a type 2, but have gone through a type 3. There's not that many projects that come through. So the pool of projects is pretty small. Some of them have chosen to go ahead and go to a type 3. Some of them have chosen, like 2 of them have chosen to go through the type 2X process. So during DOZA, we heard feedback from the Housing Bureau and have landed on allowing those projects to choose between a type 3 and a type 2 review and not requiring a DAR. And this amendment, Commissioner Bortolaso, I'll have you want to speak to it? You want to?
Yeah, and I don't know that it was clear from the amendments. This implies that I would like to keep the current requirement for a DAR to obtain public input. So there would be an opportunity for public to comment. And I guess what really struck a chord with me on this one, and again, I think this was a BDS proposal. There were testimonies, quite a few on this too. It is really to set affordable housing projects on a path of certainty and predictability very early on in the process. So the goal here is plain and simple, and that's certainty and predictability, especially for projects that are badly needed. Affordable housing projects specifically. So that's where this comes from. And again, the amendment would include keeping the requirement for a DAR for public input.
I guess I'm going to ask, wouldn't this also increase the stage and our cost for those projects? And their
Probably be the opposite, because you have a lower level of review, going from a type 3 to a type 2X. So
It does
a lower threshold.
take a DAR from being optional in either case, because based on the previous conversation, we were saying even a type 3 would have an optional DAR. So it makes it so that the DAR is required, but then it's a lower level of land use review, a type 2, which, to clarify, type 2 land use reviews still have public input. It just does not have a hearing. The public input is via mail or email to the staff planner.
any comments on this one? Do you have some, Sandra?
One of the comp plan policies in Chapter 10, which is about administration of our policies, is to limit the number and type variations on the types of review. I just keep remembering when I started working here 20 years ago, we had a type 1, type 2, and type 3 review. Now we have a 1, 1X, 2, 2X, 3, 4. I feel like 7 types of reviews is probably good, and this is a taking a type 2 and adding a DAR, which is just a new thing. Kind of like an 8th type of review, even though we're not giving it its own number. That's just one comp plan policy.
Can you remind me in a type 2 what the public input avenue is?
Yeah, Stacy, you want to?
In a type 2, you have, is it 2 or 2X? This is requirement 2?
The proposal in the footnote is a type 3 or a type 2. The applicant can choose a 3 or 2.
So the public comment period is 21 days in a type 2, and it's directly to staff via email or written comments.
So it's a staff decision.
And then the appeal body would be the design commission.
So if you add the DAR to that, you go to the design commission, get advice, then you run your process with staff.
Correct.
And then if you don't like what staff says, you can appeal it back to the design commission, which seems an odd routing. So, And the applicant would still have the option of a DAR if they wanted, if we didn't require it?
Correct.
Okay. I'm not sure I see the advantage in requiring it.
I would agree. I don't see any advantage to require it. If they feel it adds more certainty, they can ask for it.
Any more comments on this one? All right, should we do a straw poll to recommend? Do you want to make one last pitch?
No, I'm fine without requiring a DAR. I do think there is, again, an opportunity for comment. I think that was one of the arguments against it. So I think it's a good tool. It hasn't been used much, but again, I think the goal, in my mind, is really to give certainty and predictability to affordable housing. Okay. So make the process as clear as predictable as possible. And I agree, there's so many review types that you can get lost in that. So this is actually an effort to try to make it really clear and simple for certain kinds of projects.
I'll admit I'm not 100% tracking this one, so I'm hoping that someone make a motion, and I'll do a straw poll. I can do that.
We're not.
Well, I'm wondering if Ben will just withdraw his proposal.
Oh, you withdraw it?
I'm not withdrawing the proposal.
No, okay. So I guess a proposal on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, so those
who'd like to-
in favor, is this what you're looking for?
Those in
That is
favor of the proposal.
Yeah, those in favor of requiring a DAR for affordable housing projects that choose to go through a type 2 review, raise your hand.
Okay.
Okay, so this one does not pass, and we will not add this to your.
Are we giving? I mean, I need to track this.
That is what it is.
It already is.
Are they allowed to do the type 2 review process without the DAR?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Then I think we're
It
moving on.
continues as optional.
Yes.
Okay.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move up along with that one. So here we are. Where are we? Are we here?
139.
Go too far.
Page
Did I
number
go too
33.
far?
4B. Oh wait, no.
Here.
Factors, yeah.
Okay, let's go with this one. So this one, we're jumping around a little bit on the spreadsheet. The first set of items is number 33, 36, and 37. And those all have to do whether, this whole topic is about the factors reviewed during design review. So an applicant needs to go through design review, and it's either with staff or with the design commission. And we were trying to clarify in this section of the code, which is on page 139. We were trying to clarify, like, what is design review about? What are they talking about? And what does the design commission or staff have purview to request of the applicant? So 33, 36, and 37 are about considering height as a factor. That height can't be decreased during the design review process or increased in the design review process. That's what the amendment is. But actually, why don't you all just read really quickly what it's pretty short, that new sentence for, that new paragraph for factors reviewed during design review, so you can get grounded.
On the screen?
No.
Yeah, where do you want? What do you want us to read?
It's in volume 2 on page 139. And we could read it aloud if you guys don't have it.
And so what's being proposed at the moment is what you want us to read.
Right.
Got it.
What staff had proposed.
Yep.
So there's several concepts here. The first paragraph says the review may evaluate the architectural style, structure placement, dimensions, yada, yada, yada. And then the second paragraph talks about a couple of things. While the review may evaluate the distribution of massing and placement of structures on the site, the review may not require the applicant to reduce or increase the total floor area proposed for the site. So this is, we're talking about floor area, and then we had to parse out what floor area were we talking about. Almost all the zones have base floor area, then they have bonus, and then in Central City Plan District, there's unlimited FAR that can be transferred onto the site. And so there's another concept in there that we were saying, if you're in Central City, that unlimited floor area that's being transferred is subject to the discretion of the Design Commission when they are evaluating a project.
So
And
someone
there are
could
two-
purchase
there are two
FAR
suggestions.
and not be able to use it. Is that a translation of what you just said?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And remember, we heard testimony on
only in
this,
Central City where the
Understood.
FAR is.
yeah, from an
because of
attorney
the-
who questioned the legality of doing this. We allow you to purchase the transfer rights, and her point was, you will kill that transferability if people don't really know what they're buying because they think they're buying, 100 square feet of additional FAR. Then they go through design review and get told, nah, we think only 50 works. And so I remember we had a lot of head noddings on that. So in fact, I thought we had already voted on.
Nope.
Not.
We haven't even voted on any of this stuff yet.
I thought we nodded heads at some point.
We might have done that.
Well, and the question that can come up is, when you're purchasing additional FAR and FAR transfer, just like when you're purchasing a property, you're often, the purchase agreement is going to be contingent on going through the process. So I don't know that there's somebody going to go into that blindly, but just kind of give you a sense of why we have this framed this way. In a lot of areas, especially outside the central city, there's not a lot of wiggle room between the height limits and floor area. So, maximum FAR of 4:1 and maximum height of 55. And if you have to have a few little bit of setbacks, you're potentially going to have a 4 or 5 story building that's fairly squatty. You don't have the ability to make a skinny 8-story building. Central City is a little different animal because a lot of the FAR, even with typical bonuses, an example that just got looked at in the Pearl was the FAR was 9:1. The height limit was 250 feet. So obviously, without doing a very large FAR transfer, which is what was proposed, a building that was going to be 250 feet would be a very skinny footprint building. The proposal that came in essentially was somebody purchased FAR to go up to over 18:1 FAR. I think it's close to 19:1 FAR. And so the question is, should the Design Commission consider the sort of those contextual aspects of creating an FAR on that site and taking it from somewhere else and going so far beyond what is essentially shown on a lot of our central city maps.
So I guess we need to go to the justification for allowing FAR transfers in the first place, and we have. I mean, that's the policy balance, right? Like what you can use the FAR for and why we allow it in the first place. And one of the reasons we allow is to preserve existing structures, right? The eligible donors of FAR meet other policy goals.
Descending
Correct.
sites.
Right,
are
descending
often-
sites.
right.
But we don't really have in Central City for the within the sector. There's not a lot of criteria. If you're transferring FAR from a landmark, there's definitely some things that have to be done to make sure that the landmark sticks around and so on. But within the sector, there's not a lot of criteria in the Central City.
So
Yeah.
in the central city, I think if you look back to the origins of the transfer provision, the highest density location in the city and the state, massive transit investment. This is the place where you want to have that development take place, and the sooner you're accomplishing those density objectives, the sooner you're following through on the benefits of what your investments are. And any individual building or site, I guess, is a situation of ownership, finance, use, program, market. Like there's all these different variables that are going to make a building go here and not there. The transfer was a way to say if there was an alignment on those factors and a building could happen and it could transfer FAR from elsewhere in the central city or in that sector and it got built sooner than later, good on us. That's accomplishing our public objective of densifying the central city. It's kind of like an efficiency thing. we're talking about outside the central city with this, correct? This is both?
This would apply citywide.
Is everywhere.
Okay.
Which is why we put that one specific.
When in the central city too, you might, there's always been a concern about how much if you leave a site totally fallow, that it doesn't have enough FAR to deliver, you've transferred so much off of it. We have minimum FARs now, and you can always transfer FAR back onto that site when it was its time. Like, it's a fungible thing. It's not, and there's a lot of floor area in the central city to move around. That's mostly the context that.
And there's a cap on how much floor area you can add to a site, right?
Height.
Not within the
height.
central sector. So there's maximum FARs that can be bonused, and I think, and then there's FAR that can be transferred from landmarks, which is a limited pool. But then the transfer of FAR within the sector piece, there is no limit, which is why in the one we looked at, essentially the maximum FAR got doubled.
So in the central city, that's the ability to not have a cap on how much, other than the height that you fill with the height envelope, how much you fill, is a tactical choice. We've decided to maximize these heights to get ourselves comfortable with the level of height that's a possibility. We've decided to design our infrastructure capacity to serve the amount of FAR we have floating around or located in the central city, and we've got design review to try to get the optimum use, the most well-designed use of the wide range of variety you can get from having that much headroom on your site. It's different in the central city because that's where design review really does need to shape the buildings, or there could be significant advantages from that. So it's a system there to design to work that way.
So I want to hear comments from commissioners. Okay.
So, Joe, I don't know if you were meaning to do this, but all you did was convince me more to get rid of that sentence. I was already there. But so maybe, like I said, maybe you're just leaving it as food for thought. But so I would propose that you're striking the sentence, and I don't know if this is what we're talking about exactly at this moment, that says, except when floor area has been transferred to the site using floor area within the sector transfer option of the Central City District. So my motion would be strike that sentence.
So to clarify, that means that FAR would be basically an entitlement that Design Commission couldn't restrict.
It basically
even if
means
it's
that
transferred.
height is what's going to govern. There's a maximum height envelope by the. You're looking surprised, but I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking your comments to back up where I already was, which would be to strike that sentence.
No, and I think the distinction is that transfer FAR is not has always been thought of as discretionary, and that's why the height envelopes are to work with this system where the height envelopes are set very high. Base FAR is one thing, transfer FAR is another, and part of what dictates the acceptability of the use of transfer FAR on any given site is the design of the building, and that's determined through our discretionary design review process in the central city.
And it's still going through design review, whether you fill the envelope or not.
But design review may find that in any given location, it's not appropriate to fill that envelope, as in make a big pink. It may want something that's more, has a different architectural response or strategy.
And I guess all I'm getting at is, okay, so I'm glad you were able to make your point more clear, at least for me, because I was surprised to hear you coming out from the angle where I still would strike the sentence. Personally, to your earlier points, it is the central city. We're trying to, this is where we want development to happen. If there's extra FAR that we've already planned around our infrastructure around, instead of letting it sit on a site fallow, let's go, let's move it, let's get it built, let's build up. And yes, it still goes through design review. Design review still can have a lot of influence on what the building looks like, the quality of the building, the design of the building. But I personally would say transfer it in up to the height limit.
Thank you for asking me to clarify that statement, because I think I did add the confusion. The other thing about the way we've designed the central city system, and it kind of goes back to the discussion you all were having about 55 feet based on the mixed use code. We've designed a system in the central city that allows these very tall building envelopes, and throughout the central city plan this time and in previously, it's always been built around the system where you did not have to assume that was the inevitable shape of our skyline. It's the ability of developers and designers to execute taller programs on sites that don't, and it's not the assumption that all of our building envelopes in the central city are just a series of big pinks that fill up the whole envelope. Now, if that's the way we should think about those building envelopes in the central city, we kind of need to revisit the central city plan to reaffirm that agreement with the public, because that's not the premise on which we established those heights and these transfers, the whole system, when we adopted the central city plan. It's sort of basically rewriting a fundamental of that deal in the central city. That's just my experience.
So what I would argue, though, is there aren't many full block sites in the central city left that are going to fill up the whole envelope like Big Pink. There's not a lot.
Well, yeah, I guess it
There are
wasn't,
some.
right? Yeah.
Can I throw out
there's not a lot.
potential? Is there a compromise in here where the design commission, we drop the height purview from design commission, and we say design commission has purview for FAR over some percentage more than the base FAR. They basically say that you can.
I would go the opposite. If, first of all, I would strike this sentence and I would not have them alter height. But if you're gonna if that's too much for people, I personally would leave height where it's at, because again, what's happening is you're going to be buying FAR and you're going to be buying land based on the presumption that you've set a maximum height limit, and there's a way for me to get some type of floor area, whatever that maximum height limit, it has a value. So all of a sudden, as soon as you give purview to drop that maximum height limit to some discretionary process,
I don't think I described my thing right. I was saying that you would remove height as a criteria. I was saying that your height is an entitlement.
Okay.
So I'm saying height is an entitlement, and FAR, base FAR plus some percentage higher than that FAR is also an entitlement. But you can't just get all the FAR you could ever buy. So in other words, say an FAR for a site is 5-1, you could maybe get up to 7.5-1, 50% higher than that by right entitlement. But beyond that, it goes to discretionary.
Well, I think it'd be anything but the bonus height is what you're basically describing. Anything over and above what you can achieve through the bonus height options. So bonus heights being you get it through inclusionary or the historic or the open space.
You could make it higher than the bonus height options if you want. I mean, you could just
or not bonus height, bonus FAR. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So anything above that, you would be, I think, stating then goes through design commission has discretionary approval over.
Our central city maps have a base FAR and a bonus FAR. They also do allow the transfer from landmarks, and because we saw a definite, connection to a public good of transferring FAR from a landmark, those were kind of the things that we still said were entitlements. Mm-hmm. So, if something is 6-1 and it can go to 9-1 with inclusionary housing, and if they find another 2-1 from pulling something from a landmark to get to 11-1, that was still considered, that was an entitlement. It was this idea about if a developer is able to negotiate with some other property owners or a mixture of property owners to buy FAR just within the sector, that was what we were looking at, the idea of potentially having design commission have some oversight on. Partially because without that, if somebody has a 9-1 FAR and they can go to 250 feet, the reason why we were pushing back on the idea that the design commission could have some input on what the ultimate height of the building was based upon the fact that you could achieve 9-1 FAR in a lot of different ways between a 100-foot tall building and a 250-foot tall building. And we thought that could be part of the conversation. But once if you do transfer FAR to the point where you are creating a 250-foot full site building, whether it's a full block or a 10,000 square foot site, there's not, other than materials and maybe some, small kind of features, there's not a lot that can be looked at to change the shape of the building.
That's a teeny building compared to most cities in the world, a 10,000 square foot site, by the way. So I have no issues with that building going all the way up.
Jeff.
I didn't track all the nuances of this discussion, but I think it really goes to one of the core things that DOZA was supposed to accomplish, which was, we heard Kat complaining, why do we have so many hearings? I thought DOZA was intended to try to streamline where it could, to really focus the design commission on design issues. And to me, this is where the rubber hits the road. We have a lot of policies, zoning policies, that allows FAR transfers. And Joe, you articulated some of the reasons as a zoning development code, we think those are good policies. And now to say, we have some concerns how this is going to work. So let's let the design commission regulate it. I mean, we've made these zoning development codes decisions to allow a certain amount of height, a certain amount of FAR. And I think what we're trying to do in design review in DOZA is kind of help the design commission focus on design issues and not start touching on these zoning development decisions that we've made through our work. And so that's why I don't like this. We've sort of decided, we don't want design review touching FAR. Well, maybe they can. If it's a situation like this, and more complexity, more confusion, more delay, I think we just at some point have to go, there's always can be some abuse that falls through the crack. There'll always be, I happen to like Big Pink, but apparently people don't. There's always going to be a Big Pink that falls through the cracks. I don't think we can design a process. If we're going to design a process that's going to catch every possible mistake, we end up with the kind of process Kat was talking about. Everything gets put through the grinder. Everything goes through the mill. So I like to sort of stick to the concept. We've decided we're not going to have design review changing FAR, and no exceptions to that.
If I could just interject, I don't know when we made that decision, because that's not the decision we made in the Central
Well, then
City
never mind.
Plan.
I'm going.
And so that just means we sort of need to go back and redo that, because the system we've designed is not designed to function that way. That was not the premise on which we made all those.
You're saying when we
the height maps in the Central City were not judged without this discretionary design review process as part of the mix. And we can do that. We can go back and make that decision, but that's not the decision we made when we adopted the Central City Plan.
And I think it's worth mentioning, just for the record, the Design Commission is not in the business of ratcheting down heights and FARs and trying to take away development rights of any development. So in large part, this is a bit of a hypothetical conversation. And what DOZA was trying to do was clarify what is on the table and what is not on the table. And that's what we're trying to do with this section. In the meantime, we're also telling the Design Commission for these guidelines that we're adopting is take a look at the site and the development that's proposed to see if it's building on the character and local identity of the place, creating positive relationships with adjacent surroundings, integrating and enhancing the on-site features and opportunities. Those are the whole context tenant that we're trying to, giving instructions to the Design Commission that context matters. We want you to look at the context. And in this conversation about, well, what about FAR? Can they reduce the FAR? And we were like, no, they can't reduce the FAR. Then you get to which FAR are we talking about? And that's why we differentiated between the base FAR, transferring from historic landmarks onto a site. We were like, that is an entitlement, but this standard of unlimited transfers within this one plan district, that should be within the purview because of the context tenant, because we don't, the site that we were looking at is twice the height in FAR that anyone anticipated.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And
Should we break this into a couple, or do you want, Joe?
Yeah, just the end. Sandra's explanation reminded me of the one last public benefit sort of premise that's built into this system, which is that transfer FAR above, your base and your bonus is discretionary in part, but we want transfer FAR to be used, and the ability to fill up that height or do whatever you're going to do is also based on meeting these guidelines in this design quality that we've built into this review system. So we're checking that through this process and through the next one that Troy's bringing through. We set the heights in the central city plan with a system that had discretionary review. We can go back and redo that system, but that's not what this particular amendments would be about.
I guess I would like to for a proposal or two. I would suggest maybe we do height separately from FAR, height first. So that would be an amendment saying that design review cannot increase or decrease heights of buildings. Would people straw poll support that that change?
Bonus height, any height.
Yeah, the zoning code sets the height limit for a building, and
They can't force somebody to.
they can't
increase.
force someone to go lower than that.
So essentially, proposal item 33. That also added beyond height setbacks and step backs, which
I guess maybe we should parse that out. I was thinking first just heights, although step backs would be another
It's more like number 36.
Yeah, it seems to me we just spent the last 20 minutes talking about FAR. We probably ought to resolve where
Should
we're
we do FAR first?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we start talking about height, I'm going to have a different set of questions.
So actually, yeah.
Fair
I
point.
do have a question though regards to FAR. I recall the testimony that I think Jeff cited having, or at least casting some legal doubt that basically the higher tier regulating plan would be the Central City 2035, and that would allow unlimited FAR, and basically saying you can't have a lower tier regulation, basically forbidding you to do that.
Yes.
Is that a real legal concern or not?
I think we can resolve that. I think what we need from the commission is what is the policy that you want to move forward. And if we walk through this, then we'll know what the policy is, and we can change the Central City or change this to reflect that.
Okay, and another piece of, I think, crucial information for this from that testimony was that with the Central City 2035, we went from 18 to, I believe, 3, maybe 4 ways to get bonus height. So you got your base height, bonus height, and then the transfer, which it basically makes it more challenging to get the bonus. So you're relying a lot more on the transfer of FAR. That's my understanding for viability of projects. So that was one of the points that were made.
I'm not following what you're saying, Ben.
So with the Central City 2035, we went from 18 different kinds of ways to get a bonus to, I believe, 3 bonus FAR. So with this system, with the new system, basically it's harder to get bonus FAR. So you're relying more on transfer FAR from other sites within the district in order to make the project viable. That was one of the arguments that I recall from the testimony.
Yeah, it's just different. I don't know that it's harder. I mean, you could argue, so it's inclusionary housing. So there's a cost, there's maybe a greater cost associated than adding bike lockers, which was one of the bonuses. So yeah, obviously a greater cost. Harder if you mean more money, then perhaps that's a true statement. But otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward and clear how to get the bonus FAR.
So, if I may, I think there's 4 decisions on the table here.
Thanks.
Okay. So the first one, if we look on page 139, the first the first 2 lines, where it says, while the review may evaluate the distribution of massing and placement of structures on the site, the review may not require the applicants to reduce or increase the total floor area proposed on the site. So pretend we're outside Central City, there's no transfers or anything. Do people agree with that? What staff has proposed there? I haven't heard any disagreement about that. Okay.
Nor have I.
So the whole second part of this paragraph is about Central City. So moving to Central City, we already have the base floor area, and I don't hear any disagreement on the floor area being transferred from a historic district. So the whole second part is the extra transfer, the unlimited transfer. can we do a straw poll on that piece?
Can I ask a question on that first?
Mm-hmm.
So, Joe, you made the argument that we basically made a contract with the public that transfer was going to be discretionary. Does the code that enables that transfer actually say it's discretionary explicitly?
Chris, I need to go check as to where for sure the commentary laid out the understanding of that the status of that transfer FAR the way I've represented, because that's just the way it's always been for the transfer portion of this.
Okay, so I would not want to finalize my decision on this until I hear that answer.
So just to clarify, in the Central City Plan District, and we'd probably have to look at the commentary and the intent on that, but essentially any project would have to go through design review that's proposing a new building. So it would have to go through design review. Unlike some code we've had in the past about bonus heights and so on, or bonus FAR, where we've said an FAR will be granted, will be given if granted by a decision of the Design Commission. The unlimited transfer from the sector does not have anything about that. So the unlimited sector basically just states that I think there's a covenant being done between the two parties, and that as Joe mentioned, the sending site can't they can't reduce their FAR below what is required from a minimum standpoint. So if there's a minimum FAR of 3-to-1 on that site, they wouldn't be able to transfer down below that amount. But there's nothing in the Central City Plan District that says it's subject to Design Commission.
Yeah.
Saying that might be in the
Are
commentary.
you ready? Yeah.
And I would say I have to agree with Chris because I don't remember the conversation being quite as you did. So I guess it's, again, how we parse the words or understanding the commentary to go back to that would be really helpful.
Oh, no, I agree. It's I'm a little bit surprised by this result, actually, because that's, the way it was designed and has always worked. But I'll go back and check.
So I agree it's the way it's always worked. What I don't agree is maybe we were all on the same page with understanding what we talked about when we did that at Central City. In other words, I guess what I'm wondering is, did you have it in your mind a certain way because it's always worked, and me and maybe some other people had it in our mind another way? And so getting the commentary and trying to
absolutely.
parse that back
I
would
know
be
how
really
I
helpful.
represented it to City Council, so that's
You can play the video
in
for
the
us.
public.
I mean,
And that's fair.
When we had discussions with Troy on this, when it was going through.
Okay.
Because I actually hadn't realized that there was unlimited transfers in Central City. And so when we were parsing this out, I remember, drawing the base, the bonus, and then the unlimited transfers as 3 different distinct decisions.
Jeff, we have to get
Joseph's
something.
part.
Yeah.
If you're going back to kind of dig out some background material, or it might be helpful to dig out that testimony Ben and I are remembering, but not clearly.
Christy White's
I think it's Christy
testimony,
White's
she was the
testimony.
first person that
Just to
testified.
refresh us on what exactly she was claiming.
And she was speaking very, very
Well,
fast.
she was in her 3-minute mode, I know.
She was basically saying the 800s is a higher level of chapter, and it trumps the 500s, which is
Again,
where the
I'm
Central City
maybe
plan
you could
is.
just,
Yeah.
maybe she submitted a letter or just something to help us refresh what
Or
she said.
ask the city attorney. Well, if you agree with what she's saying, it'd be helpful to know that. And then I think you're implying that maybe you agreed, but there's a fix. So if there's a fix, should we?
What would that look like?
Yeah. What are we talking about?
Ben?
Just wanted to clarify that item 34 and 35 are exactly the same amendment. And based on this conversation, I also think it'd be good to, also because I wasn't part of the Central City 2035, that was before my time, and like to know a little bit more about whatever had been promised and whatever contract was made. And so I would recommend to postpone the decision on the FAR specific.
So
I think
That
we
was
can
the
talk about
third
height and
thing
other
you had,
things.
Sandra.
Right. So
What was
this
the-
second thing, it sounds like we're going back and looking at what the legislative intent was, either verbally in the commentary and coming back probably to 3x3 or something to say this was the expectation and how we represented
Can
it.
that come back to this group before the 3x3, or are we out of time for that?
If nothing else, it seems like at a minimum before the 3x3 could come back in some type of memo.
We are doing that anyway. Yeah, we have time to do that at the end of February. for
Okay.
the list of amendments, because we're going to come back and have the list of amendments all together, and so we can do it then. So that was that. The third and fourth items, the next one is height. So there's nothing to read here because we didn't propose height as we were basically okay with the design commission sculpting. We've always used the terms like the FAR is the clay, but design review is about sculpting that clay on the site. And height is one of those factors that they can consider in carrying forward the tenet of context. So that's what our position is as staff. And there are several amendments or ideas that no, height shouldn't be able to be sculpted.
Chris, you have a question? Yep.
Well, I'm looking at the intent of 36 and referencing Sandra's sculpting analogy. I mean, even if we said you can't change the height, they could change the diameter of the portion that goes to the maximum height, right? So they could, if we said height's fixed up here, this design commission could say, oh yeah, you can run a needle up to that height, but most of the FAR has got to be down here. So it becomes kind of weird for me.
Again, because we have a guideline to create positive relationships with adjacent surroundings.
It seems like you can
And
hold
other
one, but
guidelines
not
about
the other.
context.
You got to pick which one you want to hold. To me, FAR would be more important.
I guess I'm agreeing that the FAR is more important, but I guess I still want to. But any other thoughts on this amendment?
But just one last, the FAR, that's the FAR, the unlimited ability, the ability to do unlimited transfers to any given site is exactly why the assumption has always been that is the thing that is sculpted, Chris. See, so that's why I'm surprised that it wasn't that clear, but I need to go back and check. Otherwise, you got nothing to sculpt. And that unlimited transfer of FAR was kind of a concession in the Central City Plan to really help open up this and provide predictability on the height. But there is discretionary design review.
Did that amendment come at council and not in front of us?
No, I'm pretty sure it was from the get-go, Kat, but I'll go back and recall. I don't recall. But I take the lack of clarity that you all are reporting seriously, so maybe we need to double check.
Well, I thought of height as an entitlement, and sometimes you want to be able to have a view or have a shape or get up there. And I can understand Chris's point that design commission could neuter that possibility by making it a little flagpole or something like that.
Put an observation deck, but not a penthouse.
So I guess I take that point, but I don't know. I'm open to other thoughts on it.
Well, personally, I'm having a hard time. So my amendment was basically kind of somewhat to Chris's point of, I think any building should be able to achieve its maximum height limit. Design commission can sculpt, especially if you're still allowing the sentence to stay in, and that's having the conversation and clarity on that. It's just they can't completely neuter height. They
Well,
can
just
sculpt,
to be fair here,
but that means you have to set the height limit. I mean, they have to meet. So height isn't a discussion, but sculpt bulk and dimensions and placement, everything else is, which means part of the height. If you take a 2,000 square foot block, 10,000 square feet could be down here, but you still get to have a part of the building up at this height, and that's the discussion that happens at design review. But you cannot reduce the ability for part of that building to hit the height limit.
And I think that's pretty clear in the practice of the commission. It's about where is the appropriate place for the height, not is the height appropriate. That's clearly established in the entitlements, but it's just where should this go? A really tangible example is the project right here at 4th and Harrison, just finished up. They are adjacent to a public historic pedestrian path in Petty Grove Park. There was a real big discussion about where that height should go in order to not shade the park and provide some deference to the park. And the original proposal was a full built out all the way to the height, all the FAR, which completely shaded all those public spaces. And it was about where should that height be? It should be on the opposite side. So it really wasn't a discussion of you can't have the height, it's where should it be in order to respond to its context, which when the heights were set under the central city plan, it wasn't down to the site by site level. It wasn't contextual. It was how do we meet our goals. So that's what the design review process does, is help to give that site by site analysis.
Completely agree with you, Stacy. But the way this is worded, it would tell me that you can neuter the height, and that's all I'm trying to then parse back to what practice actually is.
I thought I heard through the DOZA original process that there were examples where Design Commission said you can't build this high. And I'm not sure it was Central City. It might have been outside the Central
I
City.
think it's Historic Commission.
Yeah,
Historic
I don't
was-
believe that we've had the Design Commission examples of that. And the Historic Commission, that's a whole separate thing.
Well, it sounds like if it's not in practice an issue, that it would not be a problem to say that they can't address height. And if they really want to, they can do it in the way Chris described.
Well, I think what we're talking about is that the statement, the very first line of the statement says that, may evaluate the architectural style, structure, placement, dimension. Height is one of them. So I think to make
That's
that
the May
clear,
section, but the other section is what they, where they have discretion to adjust the building.
Yeah,
Well-
and just one last point in this latest Central City Plan, we put a new map in, which was not just height, but bonus height. And the reason we did that, because in the past you had bonus height, but it was just hidden in the code. And we want it to be explicit so that everybody saw, even with the bonus, this is what we're talking about here in terms of that height envelope. And with transfers, these things are going to be achieved. So the intent is not to be able to vary height per se, but to sculpt through the FAR. That was what that system was designed for. That's why we included that second map, just to be transparent.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like Design Commission might be supportive if they're not adjusting height anyway, why would they have an objection to dropping it from the eligible things that they can change on a project?
Well, I think I'm trying to. Anyway, I think my proposal had been to remove the word height in that first description and to add to that first sentence, while the review may evaluate the distribution of massing and placement of structures on the site, the review may not require the applicant to reduce height across the entire site or increase the total floor area proposed, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's not saying that they can't play with height.
Right.
So it would still hit your example, but just add clarity to they can't take the height away completely across the site. And you're right. I don't think design review today or commission has done that, but you never know in the future.
And I don't think it's a concern with that approach. I think the concern is having this context discussion about where the height goes, and then have an applicant who someone disagrees with that saying you can't touch height at all. I think that's the concern. But some language.
But I think
like
Kat's language addresses
Commissioner-
that.
Yeah, Schultz
Yes.
would maybe get at that problem.
So can we do a straw poll on the language Commissioner Schultz just outlined that I think does say height is an entitlement, but provides flexibility to shift it around?
in support of.
Yeah.
I'd support taking that concept into the 3x3.
Okay. Support of that? Okay. Thanks.
So that was
We are at 8, so is there something that, I guess we didn't move along quite fast enough.
Can we finish? We have
I'm okay with, can people say an additional?
in 15 minutes.
15?
I did have a number 4 on this topic, which was the setbacks and stepbacks that Commissioner Bortolasa mentioned in number 33.
The rationale behind that, very quickly, is that I believe those elements are already regulated in the base zone, for instance, in the mixed-use zones.
So this is where I wonder, what is design review about? If it's not about the amount of clay, it's not about the height, it's not about the setbacks and the stepbacks, it's not about the ground floor because that's in the main base zone, it's not about the landscaping because we've covered that. What are we asking the design commission to do?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, and I think we should go back to that first paragraph of 33825035 and just state it really plainly. I think it's just an attempt to clarify what this is about. It seems to me that the discussion about what is the purview of design review and what isn't keeps kind of coming back. I have to say I feel strongly more about the height than the stepbacks and setbacks, but I also heard conversations about those already regulated in base zone. So I think it's making sure that as we go forward, that we go back and make sure that we really bring as much clarity as possible to what is the preview of the design review. And I think the previous conversation about heights, I think, gets a step closer to that.
Keep in mind, though, that we've had a lot of conversations both with standards and also with your testimony on the guidelines that showed how we're also trying to have our tools expand beyond the skin of the building, the shell of the building, where the main entrance is, and to maybe incorporate site features. Can you ask for plazas? Can you give points for plazas if you're going through standards? All of those could be interpreted to mean like, well, I can have a 5-foot setback, but to get 3 points, I got to have a 15 by 15 foot space. So we're expanding the tools to try to get at framing how a building sits on a site. And so then to kind of take it away and say, but you can't look at setbacks, you can't look at its relationship to a historic landmark, those things. I feel like that might be talking out of both sides of our mouth then, because, and then it's back to, are we just looking at the architectural materials or not?
I think that if we go with the amendment that Kat just suggested, then we have to give design commission flexibility to move things around on us, including setbacks, step downs, and things like that. And the issue that came up for me a lot was in the mixed use zones, where the base code's sort of getting into step backs on the back side of the building, and maybe we want to not have step backs on the front side of the building also. But if we go to 55 or 75 feet, whatever it is, those might not be going to design commission anyway. So that wouldn't come up.
And they're still limited to FAR. They can't reduce FAR. And so, especially in cases where the height and FAR are closer in alignment, if they start asking for step backs and things like
you just
that,
can't hit your
instead of
FAR.
having a 4-to-1, they're at a 3.5-to-1. They have to think of another way.
And the outside the central city, you have a standards track too. I think that's why we were defining them that way. Central city, no standards track. It's all discretionary. So that's one of the other confusing factors for these two models. Does that make sense? So you need to sculpt in the central city because it's discretionary. Outside the central city, we gave you two different ways to get there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we already talked about the height approach. Do we have a separate straw vote on the step downs and step backs? Those who think we should suggest that that's off limits to design commission, raise your hand.
So I'm hesitant because I think it all goes back to answering the FAR question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this
Why?
you're talking about big buildings downtown?
Again, if one was to assume that sentence could be removed through the discussions, which would be the opposite of what I believe Joe, and that he's right, and that he's going to say, stop talking about removing that sentence. But if we find out we're in this conundrum about we're not sure what the intent was, and you're basically saying that you can transfer in all the FAR through that whole envelope, it's like Joe was kind of getting at.
Oh.
So how do you force a step back or a setback and when you can obtain the entire FAR? So they're tied together, that question. I think you have to answer that FAR question first, and that's going to answer the step back question, potentially.
So imagine we're not in Central City and there's no unlimited transfer. So the setbacks and step backs that were crafted during the
Outside the
mixed-use
Central
zones
City,
outside-
I would tend to say then it's in the code, personally.
But what the code sets is a minimum, right? The minimum setback is that the building needs to be set back if you're doing residential on ground floor of 10 feet. During design review, they could say, this is Powell Boulevard, and this is a really lots of traffic. There's no on-street parking. A better design would be 15 feet. What this amendment would say is, you can't do that. 10 feet is the minimum, and the design teams have to not require the applicant to consider the context of this really busy street with no on-street parking.
I thought we talked about that when we wrote the zoning code. We talked about how wide streets should be and setbacks and.
I just want to clarify this too. In the situation outside the central city, design review is the process by which those setbacks could be adjusted either way, correct? See, don't forget, it can go either way based on the discretionary review. That is your pathway to an adjustment. So are we saying no adjustments?
Modifications. Right.
Thank you.
Potentially.
So in that example, we would say if it said 10 feet and design commission's like 5 feet, or we're hearing public testimony saying it should be less.
I think Jeff said it well. You want to say it for yourself?
If an applicant wants to request a modification, that seems to me, and the process allows that, that's an entitlement they can ask for. That doesn't mean conversely, the design commission can force a change if they haven't asked for one.
I guess it
They
comes
should have protection of what the code gives them. If they want to put on the table a modification, that's their right. But
I guess it comes back if the design as proposed has problem meeting a guideline without staggering or doing some kind of partial setback. The guideline is still what is the approval criteria.
Well, then
So
I
I
would say
think it comes back to the fact, though, if we use FAR as sort of the standard, it still is at the point where they can't necessarily say, yeah, we want more of a setback there if the end result is that an applicant's proposed FAR of 4-to-1 gets reduced to 3.5-to-1. They have to find another solution because we still are holding it to that entitlement as far as the overall square footage.
So, Phil, what you were then also saying is that there's no way a standard track project would ever get the design review because design review in that particular case, let's say that you're describing, would require a setback when there's no setback required. But I can get through standards through using a different point system. And that's kind of where I'm like, I outside the central city, I do have a problem with. I think we've written into the code what step backs and setbacks should be. We spent a lot of time discussing it. There's other ways to modify designs in bulk and things like that.
Does this apply? Are we only talking about these specific standards or are we talking about all standards? Landscaping, for example, there's minimum landscape requirements and an applicant could be providing a parking lot. And to meet these guidelines, the design commission could say, you're not creating a positive relationship.
Well, so
Where's
then
the
you're
design for resilience?
So
Maybe
you're
take
saying
out
that
a
the
couple
standards track isn't meeting it either? Because the standards track, I mean, that if I'm going the standards track,
Yeah.
and
Well, if
it
they're going-
doesn't
they may
force
have
me
to
to
do
do
other
additional
things, though.
setback.
Well, but they may, if they want to get certain points for certain things, they have to make a choice, right? Some of these choices might be placing in a plaza. Some of the choices, which we had a discussion about whether it's applicable or not, was greater parking setbacks, things like that. So there are things in the standards that potentially could impact the overall footprint. And so it's just the applicant can kind of pick and choose where they get the points.
So if they pick and choose all kinds of things that have nothing to do with their setbacks, that's what I'm getting at,
Mm-hmm.
and they get through, they get their points, you're now telling me design commission go, now I wouldn't let that building get through because I think it should have a plaza on the corner.
Well, we can't foresee every situation and the standards are prescriptive.
Totally. But that's exactly why I'm like, I don't think setback should be. There's other things, just like there's other things in the standards of ways to achieve positive relationships in the environment.
So that's what I'm trying to ascertain here with this conversation. Are we limiting it to FAR, height, setbacks, and stepbacks as 4 development standards that the design commission or design review process can't alter? Or are we talking about the other 50 development standards? There are many development standards.
It's an excellent question. I'd have to spend more time thinking about it, Sandra. I don't know, personally.
Me too. So what do we do with this one? It sounds like for FAR, we're good. For Central City FAR, we're going to come back with what the legislative intent with that transfer. For height, with the suggestion that you had, to the language for all the other development standards, starting with setbacks and step backs. Do we all want to think about it more and come back when we have the next conversation?
I think that's as far as we can get,
Okay.
given the time.
But with the
So-
understanding that it would be applicable to outside of Central City.
Right. Yes.
Or I was just thinking another way to parse it is something similar to the height, where you can't force a setback across an entire site. Or so
Qualifying.
perhaps there is a way to sculpt because there's shading of a park next door. I don't know. Some beautiful tree that really should be saved. So but you can't say you have to do it across the whole 200 feet. Like some parsing out maybe the intent. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to write, but
Very hard to write. And I think, that's the beauty and the benefit of discretionary design review is that, or any discretionary review, is that there's a historic landmark here and the entitlements are here. You get the same amount of clay, but you can sculpt it, and through the discretionary process, the public can come and testify and say, this landmark is super important and this should be set back a little further, and that would be within the context and carrying out these design guidelines. But with this amendment, we'd be saying, the side setback is 0. The design commission has to.
Well, yeah, I'm personally feeling really uncomfortable with handcuffing the design commission overly. I have major concerns here with this conversation.
Yeah, I'm kind of with
I
you,
mean,
Mike.
Phil made a very good point. We all have that.
I'm thinking about the Hollywood Theater and the mixed-use building that went next to it that essentially didn't really do much of a nod
Yeah.
to the marquee and the building there. And I believe it went through, I don't think it went through a design review, or I don't even know if D was on there at the point. But, a lot of people point out the fact that, if you had a discretionary review, you could potentially have still gotten the same FAR, potentially gotten, even more height, but maybe had it defer a little bit more to the landmark next to it. And, we are actually creating some standards that try to get at that a little bit. But I think the idea in some of these cases, you can't figure out every situation in those
Right.
cases.
Yeah, I don't like the way this has gone.
all right. We're not resolved on this one, but we do need to resolve the meeting. So thanks
you.
everyone for your patience, and we'll have to discuss how to bring this back to finish. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want to do a next step?
Oh, and yes, sorry, and we have to continue it.
And we'll be continuing this
To-
work session until
February 11th.
February 11th.
Yeah.
We'll continue where we left off.
Yeah, so February 11th, we're going to mostly talk about context, and that'll be back to the standards that were vetted with the standards working group. But before we get into that, we'll have to kind of finish this piece up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Tonight.